요하나 씨 계세요?
네, 안녕하세요.
안녕하세요. 현만입니다. 지금 어디 계세요?
네, 안녕하세요.
네.
네, 저는 지금 집에 있어요.
집에 뭐 댁은 어디 있어요? 요하나 씨
지금
대충
올로모츠에
그냥
있어요.
올로모츠 축제? 올로모츠.
네.
키 요즘 뭐 혹시 moment. Janusz, I will quiz you later. So, Robert, yeah, our guest has arrived.
Hello.
Hello, Robert. Good to see you. Well, we are still, you see, we are still waiting for some more audience. But one of my best students, Joanna Ludwigova, is already here. Okay, Robert, you're anyway still struggling. I wanted to declare you host of this, but I did not manage technically. You were not accepted. Robert, I can't hear you.
Maybe that's because I'm outside of the institution.
Yes, I suppose so, yeah. Well, the recording is running and yeah, hopefully everything is fine because we have to submit this later to somewhere.
To me.
Yeah. Well, in fact, to you, yes.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, I wanted to be vague in front of the participant.
Sorry. I'm sorry for ruining that.
Okay. Well, I still expect a few more participants. Just a moment. Let's. And we will anyway cut these preliminaries, maybe.
Yes.
I mean, I will give a very official introduction, but maybe we will keep that, but otherwise.
Yes.
Okay, Anna 씨, Monica 씨, Sabina 씨. Please make yourself visible, at least for a start, but if possible also later on, because that will create a nice communication atmosphere. I mean, even if mostly Robert will be talking, it is communication. Anna she, well, okay, can we call this a quorum? Yeah.
I'm happy to start.
Robert, I think we have to assume that a few more will hopefully attend. There is a funny coincidence. We have the AKSE Asian Studies conference that involves many people. Maybe some students who, well, will switch from there to here, I hope. Well, anyway, thank you for coming, Johanna Shi, Monica Shi, Sabina Shi, Anna Shi. And of course, thank you for coming, Robert, who would otherwise, well, who would normally actually be in Olomouc. Under normal circumstances, he would be our guest, our esteemed guest. And well, I will give a formal introduction. So let's say from here, we will cut. Okay, dear participants, I'm proud to present our esteemed guest who teaches for us thanks to EPEL, or the Academy of Green Studies in the first place, and the Association of Green Studies in Europe. And he will entertain us with a presentation on charismatic topographies, theatric geographies. And the undertitle is Landscape and Fieldwork in North Korea. And I anticipate a very entertaining and enlightening presentation. Robert Winstanley-Chesters is a geographer. So this is how he defines himself, but he actually, well, crosses a lot of borders also in terms of discipline, I think. And he is lecturer at York St. John University, Bath Spa University, the University of Leeds, and also a member of Wolfson College in Oxford. He is not least managing editor of the European Journal of Green Studies. So this is a very, very important and actually meritorious position and function that he fulfills. He is, well, author of many things, but maybe in the first place, author of 3 books. One is on environment, politics, and ideology in North Korea. Another on Imagine fishing and community in North Korea and neighbors. And his third one is on myth and transformation in North Korean landscape. Well, look this up. It will be rewarding. And well, Robert will now teach, I think, on his, well, newest research. And this is about necromobilities, among others. So watch out what this means. And well, I know that Robert is a very entertaining and funny speaker. So please enjoy this, but well, pull the brakes when he is talking too fast, because that can happen to him.
Yes.
A bundle of energy, I think, who has 2 horses and ran a tour management company for electronic music artists in his early 20s. So that maybe is an indicator of his energy. And so please, in case, well, not least, he is a native speaker of English. So please make sure that you just get out, that you get out everything of him in a way that it really gets across to you. And yeah, I anticipate that we will have a very good time. So Robert, you know, we will have a break in between, if possible at around 11:15. Quarter of an hour, but otherwise up to you. And you are now the well, you are now the owner, so to say, of this class for up to 1 o'clock. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen, which might take a little. I'm going to share my slides, which might take a little while because there are a lot of them. I'm just doing that now. So tell me if you can see them.
Yes.
And can you see them? The next important thing to check is, can you see them moving?
Yes, we can see them moving.
Okay.
Maybe you could. Maybe it would be better if you enlarge it.
Yes, I will. I mean, I was just checking first.
Yes, thank you.
So thank you very much for having me. I dearly wish that I was with you. In fact, I had obviously intended to be with you, and I think I only changed my hotel booking and flights and stuff like that a couple of days ago. So COVID, alas, has intervened again, which is very sad. I was very much looking forward to actually getting to the place, or how do you pronounce it, Andreas, again, which I've been struggling to pronounce for ever since you asked me?
You should actually ask the students because
Ah,
I'm not even a native speaker. I would say
Oh, yes.
Olomouc.
Yes.
What, Monica, is that correct?
Yeah, it is. It is Olomouc.
Olomouc. Okay, so I was stuck with you wondering whether it was Olomouc or Olomouc or something like that. But I didn't think it was much. I didn't think it was ch or ch because it would have had an extra diacritic mark at the bottom. You know what I mean? And if it was Olomouc, then like maybe we would have been in Serbia or something like that. You know, which we are not, obviously. So Olomouc. Okay, so. Thank you very much for inviting me, Andreas. Yeah, like I say, I'm sorry that I'm not there. I'm obviously also not where the background to my screen is. That's the Taedong River in Pyongyang behind me on a beautiful sunny day, and always looks considerably better than my office, you know. So that's always my Zoom screen behind me. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not in Pyongyang. I wouldn't have such good Wi-Fi connection if I was in Pyongyang, but you know, anyway, so thank you very much for having me. And I am going to actually talk about, my plan was to actually talk about touch on all the different aspects of my research, talk about different examples of North Korean charismatic topography, theatric geography, etc. From when I started my PhD back in 2008, and go through not exhaustively, so I'm not going to talk for hours and hours, but not exhaustively, but to touch on the different research projects and the different spaces that I have been, most of which are in North Korea, some of which are not. So there's some field work in South Korea and China that relates to this. And then go through the most recent thing that I did, as Andreas talked about, on necromobility, and explain what that is. Then also touch on places that I'm going in the future with my field work and research, to sort of suggest, you know, something for the future. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing. So it's a big, so I have like an hour and a half now, or hour and however long it is, and then we'll take a break, and then I may talk more, but there's plenty of time for questions. I'll always make time for questions, lots of questions. So I might go through the historical examples that I've done first, and then get to the more recent things after 11:15. That sort of makes sense, or the future stuff after 11:15. And as Andrea said, as I can end up talking really fast, so I apologize for that. There's another famous scholar of Korean studies, Alain Delezin, from France, from the University of Paris, who literally always said whenever he hears me, "Oh, I hope you don't speak too fast." And I'm like, I'm really sorry that that perception of me follows me around, but it is true. So if you feel like I'm going too fast, tell me to slow down. It's fine. You can raise a hand or whatever. Raise your Zoom hand, you know, and I will slow down. I'm trying to be slow at the moment, so I understand. So, and thank you so much for the generous introduction, Andreas. I am lots of things. I did my PhD in, so I will start the slides just quickly. So I did my first degree and first master's degree in Edinburgh in Scotland.
Oh, but you are now muted. Hello. Johannes, do you hear something?
Yeah, I hear you, but I think his connection might be
Thinking about environmental.
Sorry, Robert, you were away for how long? 20 seconds, half a minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope that doesn't happen again. Yeah. If it does, I mean, I can see you freeze, Andreas. You're the one. So to me, it looks like you dropped out. Yeah. But if that happens again, I will.
It just happened, right? Okay, we have to like agree on some sign. Maybe I will hold my box of coffee beans up to the camera, or what can I do? That's bad. Everybody, right?
Maybe write a message in the
Right.
Zoom. You might
Yes,
see it.
it's maybe less eccentric. Thank you.
Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, now he has even disappeared. Oh. That's unfortunate. Thank you so much for coming. But where are the others? Are they attending? Okay, Robert is here. Robert, yeah, you were clearly away. Is it your connection or is it the fault of Olomouc? I don't think so. Robert, and you are muted. You're muted. Can't hear. No.
Sorry.
Okay.
It's my connection. I've moved directly. I've moved to directly over the Wi-Fi router. so always a good place to be. So hopefully it will be better from here.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me try again. So you should be able to see my screen. Normally my Wi-Fi connection is brilliant, but it only fails when I actually have something important to do, which is probably the case with everybody. Anyway, let me just share my screen. So anyway, yes. So I was explaining that I used to be a theologian. So I did my first degree and first master's degree in theology, and then I changed I took 9 years out of academia when I ran an electronic music production company and tour management. And then I came back to academia as a human geographer and did an MA and PhD in human geography. And that's where I encountered North Korea. I was looking at thinking about ecology, thinking about environmental management, and North Korea just was completely fascinating to me in that aspect. And so that's where that's how I ended up doing Korean studies things. So my PhD is my first book, Environment, Politics, Ideology in North Korea, which was published in 2014. And then I worked in Australia for a couple of years, writing the book Fish, Fishing and Community in North Korea and Neighbors, and the book on myth and transformation in North Korean landscape, which are both actually free. So the Fish, Fishing and Community in North Korea and Neighbors is open access. So if you're interested, you can read online for nothing. If you have Amazon, the new goddess New Goddess about Pegdu was published by Amazon Kindle, so it's as well as hardback and paperback. So it's available for free as a Kindle if you have Amazon and you have a Kindle or being able to download ebooks. So my books don't cost 120 quid, like 120 pounds, like normal academic books. So the hardback of the Fish, Fishing and Community is also quite cheap, but both the digital versions are free. Anyway, so that's where I've come. There's actually a second edition of that Fish, Fishing and Community book coming out next year, and there's actually a translation into Russian for the Russian market if anyone's interested. I don't feel that, you know, perhaps people in the Czech Republic wouldn't be so interested in that obviously anymore, but although they would ever have been interested in that, but anyway, so that's where I've been. I've obviously published a lot of papers, academic papers as well and stuff like that. So so I think it's important to say a little bit about where I come from theoretically, where I come to North Korea from theoretically, and ideas about landscape, because I use a lot of language and use a lot of ways of talking about things and methods which derive from particular sort of theoretical structures and ideas, which are often not normal in Korean studies or not normal when it comes to North Korea. So I just wanted to touch on them because they may help you they may help you understand me better now. And if you read any of my work, may help you understand me better then. So I look at North Korean politics and this notion of charismatic politics through the lens of Hoinik Kwon, Kwon Hoinik, depending on where you are in the world, and Byung-ho Chung, who and their work, North Korea Beyond Charismatic Politics. And they see North Korean politics through the lens of Max Weber's notion of charismatic politics or politics, charisma in politics, the use of charisma in politics, and Clifford Geertz's work on, well, it sounds really obscure, on 16th century Balinese court politics. So Bali, the little country that's now in Indonesia, had a political form that the performance was very important for the king and the sort of elite parts of the court to demonstrate. So they had to perform in particular ways to demonstrate they were capable of ruling. And so Geertz calls that a theatric politics, and Max Weber takes that on with this more developed notion of political charisma, and then Kwon and Chung absorb all of that and basically, you know, take that into North Korean politics, saying that, I'm sorry about all the notification pingings, I can't do anything about it, I'm afraid. They take it into North Korean politics and talk about how essentially Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un, how the hierarchy of leadership, the sort of leadership of North Korea have to constantly perform particular aspects of North Korean history and memory in order to demonstrate their authority and their power. And those performances like a constant about different aspects of North Korean history, or the way that North Korea sees its own history. And those performances happen in very important geographies, yeah, and landscapes. And so my jumping off from that is to say that in a theatric politics, in a theater state, you know, all the state is the stage, yeah, and in that, if all the state is the stage, then anything can be an actor on that stage. If there's no limit to the stage, then all the things in the state can be the stage. Not necessarily just humans, but also like topographic features, animals, plants, that sort of stuff. So that's where I come from. That's how I understand North Korea. Obviously, I also know that it's a full-on autocracy and at times Stalinist, sometimes post-Stalinist. I also know that it is a tremendously bad place to be in terms of human rights, and does dreadful things. So I know all of those things at the same time. Yeah, of course, I understand all of those things at the same time, but this is the way that I look at landscape in particular. So as a human geographer, with all of that in mind, about North Korea in particular, I follow through the work. I theorize it in terms of landscape as symbolic, and social and political. And I follow the work of actually a lot of British people, Dennis Cosgrove, Noel Castry, and Eric Svengedow. Cosgrove in particular, who is a human geographer in Britain in the 1970s and 80s, he mainly talked about the formation of the United States and the way that as the United States grew and as settlers to the United States settled further and further and further west, they basically reconfigured the landscape as they went to make it more authentically civilized as they understood it. And that process of landscape transformation essentially creates the United States that we know today. And the landscapes that they created were often very symbolic of civilization, of rationality, of the country that they wanted to build now outside of Europe, but also of the spaces that were familiar to them from the European countries from which they came. So you see that when people build new towns and new parks, they immediately build landscape gardens, parks where they can walk around, parks where they can have pleasure parks and that sort of stuff. And they change the landscape. One that we know very familiar, which is familiar to us, which is based on property ownership, and everything becomes very structured and like the little squares of territory and that sort of stuff. So they basically reconstruct the landscape into this sort of familiar space that they're used to from Europe, as well as this sort of utopian idea of the space that they're trying to kind of create in the United States. And North Korea is also, I mean, communist countries, socialist countries, countries from before 1992, whatever, the sort of socialist communist project, they were also like that. So those countries also sought to build, transform landscapes into sort of authentic socialist spaces, modern spaces, as the sort of socialist modernity saw it. And North Korea is also like that. So North Korea also has this idea of transforming landscape into more authentically useful, socialist, productive, etc. space, and that literally involves transforming the actual physical shape of the landscape often. So in that landscape that's been socially, politically constructed, there are material things, and so those material things are also important to me. Not just because of, obviously in my theorization, they are actors in the theatre state. And I look at these actors, these material things, objects, animals, plants, topography, through the work of Jane Bennett and others, who basically suggest that matter, material objects, things, anything, can have political power and agency in the sort of construction of politics and society and social situations itself. So, but Jane Bennett theorizes this notion of vibrant matter, matter with its own agency, and in the sense that the absence or presence of some materials can make a real difference to the politics of a place, and we in my own country, I look at the arrival, the sudden appearance of oil in the North Sea as a material object that transformed the economics and politics of the United Kingdom, and gave our country, gave the government of our country the financial ability to ride out the sort of post-colonial, post-imperial period, but also to sort of reconfigure the economy of the state and the society of the state in the way that they wanted. Gave them a sort of a long-term bank balance, which they could do that. And so the absence or presence of that material was extremely important. And I look also at the way the idea of volumetric space. So the way that states use material, the volume of material in a way to sometimes build their own sovereignty. So looking at Singapore, for example, and Hong Kong, the way that countries with a restricted amount of space actually, use coastal reclamation and ownership of the seabed to basically use the volume of the territory that they have available to them to build more of the country and to assert their sort of territorial rights even more. Yeah, and that doesn't mean just building out new coasts. It can also mean building up and creating a denser volume of space as a country. All of these things exist in the web of life, as Jason Moore talks about this idea of the web of life. And the web of life includes absolutely everything, so not just humans and money, but also the material things that you buy and the objects that you can't buy and things like that. And although Jason Moore theorized this notion of the web of life for capitalist countries and capitalism, I think you could just as easily use it for non-capitalist countries and places like North Korea. And you could also problematize the entire notion of what is capitalist, because, North Korea seeks to make money in a way similar to any other country, in a sense. It just, the value accrues somewhere else, if you know what I mean. So it doesn't accrue to the working class, it doesn't accrue to the bosses, it accrues to, or the sort of, not the bosses, it does accrue to the bosses, doesn't accrue to shareholders, it accrues to the sort of party elite. So anyway, so I look at through these things. And finally, I also look at notions of invented traditions and imagined communities. And we'll see this a lot when I come to talk about myths and transformation in North Korea. But Hobsbawm and Ranger's work on the invention of tradition is super important to North Korea, because essentially it's invented its own tradition and it invented its own history. Yeah, obviously there are historical elements to the sort of things that underpin North Korean historiography, like the fact that Kim Il-sung really was part of a guerrilla band in the 1930s against the Japanese and fought them occasionally in the forests of Northern Korea. But the historiography is so enormously overblown around those quite small events that it's sort of invented its own tradition. And also it's important to remember that none of the people fighting in the 1930s against the Japanese with Kim Il-sung were fighting for something called North Korea. Yeah, so they were fighting for Korean independence, and they imagined themselves to be, nationalist, socialist, nationalist Korean independence fighters. And later, after 1945, that memory and that history of that contest and that struggle gets imagined it gets reimagined so that they are an imagined community of North Koreans fight against the Japanese. And there are various invented traditions around them. And there are new invented traditions in North Korea all the time. I actually have a book chapter coming out in like a week with the, not with you, Andreas. Are you in that book? Oh, right, yeah. So I have a book chapter coming out in a week with the University of Hawaii Press, which is specifically about an invented tradition that I'm going to talk about today. The School Children's March. Yeah, so I'll talk about that. So those are the theoretical frames and the way that I look at things. So hopefully that will give you a better sense of the language that I use at times, and the way that I look at things when I look at North Korean charismatic politics. So when we look at North Korean charismatic politics, or North Korean politics at all, we look at it like this. Yeah, so often we look at it like this. We see, these classic images of like Kim Il-sung, the great leader, appearing not to get wet when it's raining, of Kim Jong-il, the great leader, an uncomfortable man, but somehow capable of riding a white stallion on a mountain. The young generalissimo, Kim Jong-un, somehow fitting into the really small-looking submarine. We see this very, very sort of like hyperbolic sort of expression of power and charisma. when it comes to North Korean leadership. This is obviously the image it wants to give to us. But when we think about North Korean geography and topography in the global public mind, we think about these sorts of geographies and these sorts of materials in those geographies. So we think about North Korea's fissile or explosive nuclear technology, materials, and we think about the landscapes and spaces of North Korean, military capability and nuclear capability. And when we think about North Koreans, we either think about the party elite and the sort of the Kims, or we think about, these North Koreans. We think about North Koreans scrabbling for food, desperately hungry, or incarcerated against their will in labor camps, and that sort of stuff. So, we think about North Koreans globally in these particular ways. And because of these ways, we think about, this gives what I call a politics of, there's a important politics in North Korea, which we don't think about so much, but which is always there, which is we get this dichotomy, this dualism between a North Korean politics of presence, where there's an availability of things, which for us is their availability of nuclear weapons or missile materials, that sort of stuff. But in North Korea, the presence is about food and material with which the population can live. Yeah. So this is very political. So the political availability of materials like fruit and vegetables and meat and rice and that sort of stuff. And that we contrast that with a politics of absence. So the absence of some things, so like the absence of food, the absence of fuel, the absence of housing, that sort of stuff. And so this politics and absence connects to this absence and presence politics connects to all of the stuff that I talk about in terms of developmental stuff and environmental development, because much of North Korea's current developmental policy that impacts on the environment is about presence, so making things more available. Right, so with all of that, you have to bear in mind that, and I go back to talking about North Korean historiography. So in particular, I wanted to talk, I think about North Korean charismatic spaces, in particular, like Mount Paektusan. So Paektusan is, for Koreans, has a, immense amount of like charisma about it, historically. It's one of those places that's like, there's myths about it that have it as the birthplace of the universe. So the whole universe emerges out of Paektusan. The lake on the top of Paektusan, also like myths about the Tangun, and how the first king of Korea was born from a mythical union between a bear, who was also a woman, and God on the mountain, although it's never really clear whether that's Paektu or not. But anyway, but you see them there on the bottom left-hand corner, there with God as the tiger, the woman Unyo as the bear. So sacred space, and important to put topographic space, all important for volcanologists, because obviously it's a volcano, it's an old volcano. I actually have a friend of mine who works for the US Geological Survey, who did a lot of work researching the size of the ash cloud from the Tianqi, the Millennium eruption, trying to see how big the Millennium eruption was. So it's an important space topographically, sort of ecologically, because also it's quite very high up. It's got a very high mountain plateau, so interesting species. But it's a very political space, and the political space is represented. That's the secret guerrilla camp. So a lot of North Korea's historical mythologies revolve around this place. Really interesting to say that this place wasn't even in Korea until 1964, I think. So there was a long-standing issue with the border between Korea and China, especially Qing China. So obviously Paektusan, long-standing thought of as part of the sort of Korean spiritual nexus, but actually the top of the mountain and the lake was in China because of a 1712 surveying mission in 1712, and this surveying mission between Qing China and Choson, jointly organized because of the complications around who owned the top of the mountain. When they did the surveying mission, the Choson surveyors realized that they had actually allowed Korean settlers to settle too high up the mountain in a way that broke a previous agreement with the Qing dynasty. And so in order to avoid trouble during the surveying mission, the Korean surveyors, the surveyors from Choson, walked the Qing surveyors up to a different point on the mountain, from where they couldn't see any Korean settlers' houses, and then told them that the spring that they were looking for was there, and this was the spring of the Tumen River. They were looking for the spring of the Tumen River. Actually, the spring that they'd found was the Amur River on the other side of the watershed, and so essentially, to avoid political complication, the Choson surveyors basically gifted the north of the whole top of the mountain to the Qing, and advocates of Greater Korea use that sort of surveying mission to say that actually, because of that, Choson actually owned everything north of the Amur River as well. Yeah, but this was only resolved in 1960s when to build a relationship between Maoist China and North Korea. Chairman Mao and Kim Il-sung reached an agreement that actually the border would run straight through the middle of the lake on the top. So bizarrely, the top of Mount Paektu was gifted to North Korea by Chairman Mao in the 1960s. And theoretically, it hadn't actually been a Korean territory until that point, which is amazing, to consider. There's an amazing piece of work by Nan Chen Song, a brilliant book on the Tumen River demarcation, published by the University of Cambridge, which has got a great story in it about that. So this mountain, because it's so important, and because it's so important in so many different ways, sacred, spiritual, political, topographical, it becomes in people's minds like legendary and enormous. And that even comes across to Western adventurers or Western geographers when they first get there. So Charles Campbell was the first British person to see Mount Paektu, and he was actually on a field trip with the Royal Geographical Society in 1892. And after visiting Korea, he had to go back to the Royal Geographical Society in London and give a report. And he records in this is in the Journal of the Royal Geographical Society, that Paektu-san, he was told, was 60 miles high and 300 miles around at the base, and there's a lake that's 250 miles around at the top, and he was told this essentially by locals. So you can see the massive cosmic scale of this mountain from the in the sort of cultural mind of the time. And so this is the first encounter the Europeans, the sort of Western geography, get with Paektu-san, that it's this just impossibly gigantic mountain, and it's surrounded by wilderness. So this is I mean, obviously at the time, Paektu-san, massively important, quite hard to reach at the time in the late 19th century, and surrounded by quite dense forests, which were becoming less dense because there was a long campaign of logging. So the forests around Paektu-san were very, very valuable, with the rich, dense hardwood that lived there, old wood, old trees that had not been cut down. And so there was a whole industry of logging, which shipped the trees out of Korea via the Yalu-Amnok River. So there's a whole industry, and they still do this, of log rafts. So people would float the log rafts down the river from the deep interior and around Pakistan, out down the Yalu Amnok River to Sinwiju, Dandong, that area where it is now. Anyway, so it's very important. So that forest wilderness is very important, and that forest wilderness is where my first work on North Korea and first field trips to North Korea come in. And looking at forest geographies of North Korea, if you want to say something about forests and forested wilderness on the Korean Peninsula, I find it really useful to talk about the different perceptions of when it comes to forests and forested places that you find in China and Japan. So Mark Elvin's work, The Retreat of the Elephants, tells you the sort of basically not just the retreat of the elephants, but the retreat of the forests in China. So the Chinese culture in the past perceives elephants and forests because that's where elephants lived in their imagination, to be sort of dangerous spaces, you know, if you wanted to civilize, if you wanted to develop, you needed to get rid of them. They were full of disease and miasma, that sort of bad air that carried disease around. And so forests have always been under heavy pressure in Chinese culture, especially sort of wild forests. And that contrasts with the ideas about forests in Japan, where we perceive now Japan to be very green and taking good care of its forests, and it did that for many centuries before now, not for any sense of conservation, but because Japanese cultural traditions meant that it was important to have particular strength trees, particular height trees, and width trees to be able to make the beams and the timbers of houses out of, and also the masts of ships. So ship masts had to be a particular height and a particular width. And so it was important for you to know how many of those trees you had. And so there was, every area of Japan had a forest man whose job was to count them and to record the age of the trees, the width of the trees, so that it was possible for the bureaucracy and the sort of governments, the sort of like, whether this is the central government or Bakufu sort of warlord governments, to know how many trees there were. And that meant that, you know, forest cover in Japan was well maintained generally. It did decline in the 16th, 17th century because of population growth, but it was recovered later. And now 19th century ideas about forestry from the imperial Japanese period, Meiji period as well, mean that Japan has very good forests for a country of its level of density, population, etc., etc. And that was also Western geographers' perception. But when Japan colonized Korea, like many perceptions of Korea, and Japanese forest specialists felt that, you know, Korea was in a terrible state forest-wise. So it felt that the Koreans had always taken dreadful care of their forests. They'd chopped them down they'd chopped far too many trees down. They'd denuded the slopes. They hadn't even exploited the capacity that they did have. And so Koreans essentially had a terrible history of forestry management, according to the Japanese. One of the government generals says that the Korea has no forest law to speak of. So this is the Japanese perception. The work of John Lee at the University of Durham on the Chosun archives suggests that that's not at all the case. He's actually got a book coming out called The Empire of Pines, which suggests that actually the Chosun dynasty had a very strong bureaucracy and system of management around its forests. It's just that the tree that they were particularly interested, the Chosun government was particularly interested, the red pine, was not the tree the Japanese Empire was interested in. And also the Japanese Empire had some sort of pathological dislike of the sort of red soil that you used to get in upland, that you'd get in Korean upland areas. And for them, they felt this red soil meant a barrenness. Yeah. So actually, it was very productive, and the work of John Lee, you know, sort of really suggests that. So also, the work of David Fedman, whose book Seeds of Control has just come up about Japanese forestry in the colonial period, is very important. So there was a lot of ideas about. Excuse me, I'm just trying to move the. Where is it? Move the slide. Move the faces. So there was a lot of focus on capitalizing during the colonial period on Korean forestry. So sorry for the bad picture. These are timber rafts. These are the timber rafts on the Tumen and Yalu River, which had happened before the colonial period, but were dramatically increased during the Korean colonial period. There were also efforts to sort of rationalize and scientifize, if you like, the colonial forestry projects in Korea. So there were a number of seedling stations, nursery gardens, and model forests created across Korea, where the Japanese colonial administration basically sought to implant Japanese tree species and ways of looking after trees onto the Korean mainland, and sort of to make the forest spaces more Japanese, and also to reforest Chosen in a way that made sense to the Japanese. So keijo is the old word for soul, obviously, but from the colonial period. And so this is what I call building a colonial arboreal topography. So building a forest topography of the colonial period. So building these planting these various sort of new sort of Japanese forests of acacia trees, Japanese trees, and other alien species on the Korean mainland. And those new ideas about the use of topography and forests and trees were super important to the politics of colonial Korea. So the Japanese had actually borrowed the notion of Arbor Day from the United States. The Arbor Day was invented bizarrely by the governor of Nebraska in, I think, 1860, the idea of a tree planting day. And the Japanese surveying missions to America brought Arbor Day back to Japan and implanted it as an important day in sort of bureaucratic performativity. So also making sure that Arbor Day became the day of the birth of the first Japanese emperor. So I think was it the 4th of April. And so in our modern calendar anyway. So you see many governor generals, many other colonial bureaucrats planting trees in Korea on Arbor Day, on tree planting day. Every single governor general of Chosen ends up, there's photos of every single one of them planting saplings, planting trees, and like the parts of government sending out all their civil servants to plant trees on Arbor Day. So it becomes a hugely important way of demonstrating this idea about modern charismatic forests and sort of appropriately modern forests, and the sort of way that politics gets connected to sort of environmental development and stuff like that. It becomes really important. And this means that we talked a bit about Kim Il-sung, or I talked a bit about Kim Il-sung and the sort of guerrilla fighters in the 1930s. And so that means that when they are fighting or harassing the Japanese troops in the wilderness areas to the north of North Korea, often in the Manchurian boundaries around Paektusan, although nearly all the writing, many stories put them directly on Paektusan, but they were never quite on Paektusan. But anyway, so they're fighting around these spaces, and what I call is they encounter tainted topography. So these Korean socialist guerrillas, including Kim Il-sung, who are seeking to resist the Japanese and build a socialist, purely Korean national identity, they do so, the fight happens through spaces which are tainted by the impact of Japanese colonial tree planting and sort of management of the topography. And so Kim Il-sung spends immense amount of time talking about how the land has been ruined by the Japanese, and they've tried to transform it into Japan, and that we must remove quickly the after effects of Japanese colonial rule, which he means the trees, yeah, so removing the trees. So this topography is tainted for the North Koreans, and I'll talk a little bit more later about how they do that, and the campaigns that for managing and undoing the work of the Japanese, if you like. I want to say a little bit more about Paektusan and the sort of mythology of mountains in Korea, before going on to talk about a particularly important character in the transformation of that landscape, that tainted topography, and unmaking the tainted topography, if you like. So these are sanshin, and this is the notion. So there's a sense which you may have if you studied Korean history and sort of Korean social cultural development during the Chosun dynasty, and even before it in the other kingdoms of Korea, the other versions of Korea, that geomancy is really important to Korean history. If you just wait 1 second, I just need to mute myself for 1 minute while I just.
Well, okay.
Sorry, excuse me, I just had to check something. So geomancy is very important to Korean cultural history. And one aspect of the geomancy, talking essentially like, well, in China, we talk about feng shui, you know, but in Korea, you might talk about pungsu. So geomancy, the major way that this gets connected to North Korea, and what I wanted to talk about is through this notion of Paektu Taegan. So this idea that Mount Paektu, Paektusan, is a sort of basically a lightning rod for cosmic energy. Yeah, so cosmic energy is basically flows into Paektusan. Obviously, it's the birthplace of the universe. Other people have theorized whether it's projected from elsewhere in China, like Mount Wutai. But anyway, Paektusan is this sort of cosmic spiritual energy hub towards the north of on the north of Korea, and through the various mountain ranges of Korea, that cosmic energy is dispersed through the peninsula. And that chain of mountain ranges, because obviously Korea is quite mountainous, so that chain of mountain ranges happens, basically disperses it everywhere through the Korean peninsula. And so that's how sort of cosmic energy and life force energy get projected throughout the Korean peninsula. And at various places on the peninsula, that energy is particularly strong with particular mountains. So Paektusan obviously is famous for that, but there are other mountains like the Kumgangsan, the Diamond Mountains, Chilbo, Halasan, the mountain on Jeju, and other mountains around the peninsula. And in those particularly important spiritual mountains, full of cosmic energy, you get this phenomena of sanshin or sinshon, which are mountain spirits. So these are semi-deities, demi-deities, I don't know what you would say, who they either are the mountain themselves, they're literally the spiritual manifestation of the mountain's cosmic energy, or they are people who were important to the mountain at one point, or that were that sort of connected to the mountain at some point, and they were absorbed into the mountain, and they become part of the mountain as like the mountain's spiritual being, if you like. And there are a number of these all over Korea, and there are sanshin revealed. There are lots of shrines, sanshin-gak, in these various mountains, where the sanshin are worshipped. I don't know, can be worshipped, and often you find people who are the sanshin, like old women, old men who are the sanshin themselves, who are the shrine custodians, but they are also actually that they feel, and the people around them feel, that they are in some way the sanshin themselves. Yeah. So this notion of Pektateg, the sort of cosmic energy, these mountain spirit, mountain gods, some of whom can be female, are massively important in the sort of cultural mythology and cultural landscape that creates the Korean peninsula. Hang on, I'm just trying to decide. So one of them, and this is weirdly, not weirdly, this is, I guess, controversial, and which my third book is about, is Kim Jong-suk. So I'm not saying Kim Jong-suk is literally a sanshin. She's not literally a mountain god, but she is made one in a way by North Korea's mythology. So I call her the woman of Paektu. So Kim Jong-suk is the first wife of Kim Il-sung. She is the mother of Kim Jong-il and the grandmother of Kim Jong-un. She is often, you see these most important rooms and stuff like that in North Korea have these portraits of the leaders. It's a little bit old-fashioned. You don't really see too many of her anymore, but you know, often she is the third one in the sort of like the pictures. Although you don't see her as much, but she used to be the third one in this sort of line of paintings. So she died in 1946, I think 1946. She was she was born in 1909, and she joined the guerrilla band when she was very young, like the age of 13 or 14, and sort of became a member of the sort of female group of guerrillas who supported fighting guerrilla. I don't mean like, you know, guerrillas like apes. I mean like guerrillas like fighters, who supported Kim Il-sung. And so there's a particular journey that Kim Jong-suk goes on, the journey to nationalism, but it's also the journey to her sort of deification and her sort of incorporation in this in the topographic memory of North Korea. And so it's important. Journeys are often important in this mythology. So she starts in Haeryong in North Korea, or it is in North Korea, on the banks of the Amnok Yalu, and she has to leave. So she is her family are very oppressed by the Japanese colonial administration in her life story. They're very oppressed. They destroy her house, they destroy her home, they imprison her family, and so she flees. She flees the country. She flees Korea and ends up in Manchuria, where she ends up joining the guerrilla band. She's radicalized she's very heavily radicalized by the communist guerrillas, and sort of becomes a different sort of character. She transforms from a child to this sort of educated guerrilla fighter, and she becomes like the leader of the female guerrillas of Kim Il-sung's band, and a hugely important character for also bringing in other young female fighters into the campaign, and sort of serving as like a mentor for them. And all of this is going on in this northern space, yeah, this north space around around Paektusan and the northern edge of Manchuria, Korea. And obviously, because she's important, because she's one of the most important female guerrilla fighters in the movement, she ends up knowing Kim Il-sung, and they apparently work closely together. And at one point in the mythology, it is acknowledged that they are having a relationship. They're like boyfriend and girlfriend, and it does this in a particularly extraordinary way, because obviously, for the political narrative and the ideological narrative, these people must only really have nationalism and guerrilla resistance on their minds, so not affections for each other. And so they go out of their way, the writing and the narrative and the mythology goes out of the way to avoid talking about the relationship. But at one point, and it's a sunny day apparently in 1936, Kim Jong-suk's female guerrilla band are having lunch by Lake Samji, Samjion in North Korea, what's now North Korea. And they're having lunch by the river, having fought the Japanese in the morning. They're having a relaxing lunch by the river, by the lake. And who should come around the top of the lake but Kim Il-sung and his guerrilla band. And it's a wonderfully sunny day. And in the writing, in the history of the moment, one of her guerrilla colleagues says, you know, it's a really beautiful day. It's a lovely place, isn't it? You know, wouldn't it be, you know, seeing as you're so close, wouldn't it be nice to have a photograph to, you know, acknowledge the fact that you're together and that this is a beautiful day? And so they take what is supposed to be the photograph on the right, which is not really a photograph, but it's supposed to be a photograph, which is Kim Jong-suk and Kim Il-sung standing by the side of Lake Samji next to a birch tree. And in the text, Kim Jong-suk is supposed to have said when she saw the photograph that it was as good as a wedding photograph to her. So my supposition is that ultimately this is an acknowledgement of their relationship, although they're not really physically affectionate to each other. And also the very next page in the Kim Jong-suk's biography, it skips ahead to her already being pregnant with Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il. So, you know, North Korean text very quickly skips over anything sort of physical in a relationship. Yeah, so they don't dwell on that. Yeah, ever. But the next page, she's literally pregnant with Kim Jong-il, and so obviously the relationship is there. She's the wife or the partner of Kim Il-sung, and she's going to bear the Kim Il-sung's child. So she sort of becomes a sort of revolutionary mother to the North Korean nation, also unwittingly. So this is an image. This painting is supposed to represent the infant Kim Jong-il and Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-suk by the secret guerrilla camp. And so she's the mother of the nation, and she's also the mother of the nation in terms of nationalist resistance and the sort of use of the topography. And so there's a lot of imagery of her. She's protecting Kim Il-sung here, again in a fight against the Japanese. And there's a lot of the usage of topography. So here she is fighting with the infant Kim Jong-il in her arms, but this time Kim Il-sung is protecting her. So there's a lot of the topography in these images and in this writing is really useful in an actually useful way. So the trees and the rocks protect them from the Japanese when they're fighting against them. So as if the trees and the rocks move into the path of Japanese bullets. So the whole story suggests that the sort of this powerful mother figure and her guerrilla bands are being protected by this wild wilderness topography, as if the topography of Korea, the landscape of Korea, has literally chosen sides against the Japanese. Yeah, so she is transformed by the struggle and the fight in the landscape into this sort of guerrilla hero, this revolutionary mother, the founder, the female founder of the dynasty, if you like. But also the landscape itself is transformed by these stories. So the landscape itself becomes, the topography itself becomes a really key player in the history of North Korea. And obviously you get sort of fantasy stuff like the white stallion on top of Paektusan. The peak just behind is Kim Jong-il Peak. That is actually Kim Jong-il obviously being held there. You can see Paektusan in the background. You know, sort of fantasy landscapes of nationalist resistance, but also like other particular landscapes. So we'll talk about this a bit later, but that's on the top right hand side, that's Kim Jong-suk standing next to the birch trees at Lake Samjeon, which have become a very important site for North Korean tourism and sort of public commemoration of this moment. So that leads me on to talk about contemporary imagined landscapes in North Korea. So often the contemporary imagined landscapes in North Korea. So you got Kim Il-sung there, Kim Jong-un looking like something out of a Wim Wenders movie on top of Paektusan. Often the contemporary imagined landscapes are very much connected to the sort of historical or sort of mythological landscape. So on the left are in the sort of tourist infrastructure around Paektusan. Those are the slogan trees. So the trees on which Kim Jong-suk and her guerrillas, a female guerrilla band, are supposed to have inscribed political slogans and their names on the trees in the 1930s, and apparently they're still there, protected by those sheets. Right, yeah. So those are the sort of contemporary imagined landscapes in North Korea, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. Yeah. So those landscapes are in part built into this idea of the rehabilitation of the topography after the Japanese colonization. So we see those sort of tainted topographies being rebuilt over the various sort of different plans, different forestry project plans of North Korea to build a sort of modern socialist forestry. And you see lots of examples of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il doing exactly the same tree planting as the colonial government, so adopting the similar roles. And so, and you see this sort of socialist modernity in play in forestry and the transformation of particular topographies into these sort of socialist modern spaces of forests. So these are the Taedonggang fruit farms. Right, and the use of this redevelopment of forestry and this sort of socialist modern forestry into sort of this forestry of political charisma, the topography of charisma. And so, yeah, this is what I wanted to talk about a little bit more. So the sort of these contemporary sort of like spaces. This is Lake Samji as well. So the charismatic political memory gets basically transformed into memorial. So these various memorials where to the guerrilla bands of the 1930s, built into the sort of once wild landscapes and topographies of North Korea, using the sort of topographies of charismatic memory, using those sort of topographies. So there's Kim Jong-suk's childhood home again, and places like apparently a place where she cooked for her guerrilla band together in 1936, which you can now visit, and it's also shielded from the elements. And the crossings, which I talked about before, are super important. So they don't just involve Kim Jong-suk crossing the Amnok River, the Yalu River. They also involve Kim Il-sung crossing the Amnok River. So these journeys into and out of the sort of space of Korea are hugely important. And the literal crossings and then crossing back later into the realm of struggle against the Japanese are also super important. And this is what I wanted to talk about when I talk about imagined communities and new imagined traditions. So in 2015, North Korea started this program of the 250-mile school children's march. So school children's march, basically they would send groups of school children to follow the route that Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-suk took to flee North Korea, to get out of Korea from the Japanese colonial administration into Manchuria. These school children would reenact the journeys in which they traveled to the Amnok Yalu River, and also visit all of the places that were important to the struggle against the Japanese in the past, and would go past the various important infrastructure projects along the way, of course. So, so this happened in 2015 for the first time. And so they visit all of the various important places along the footsteps of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-suk. And this is followed in the North Korean media and on television in North Korea. You know, there's lots of reports every night about where the school children are. And they do this for a number of years. And they connect this with this sort of study group phenomena where your local work unit or your local party unit in North Korea will travel to a place that was important in the topography of North Koreans' history and visit important places and spaces in that topography in an attempt to absorb some of the energies of those past journeys and past interactions with the sort of important things in the Korean memory. Yeah, so you see all sorts of study groups setting off from all sorts of different industries to do this. The last time the children's march didn't happen this year because of COVID, but in 2020 it happened. It happened in January, and so it becomes larger and larger each year. So this is a repeated tradition, an imagined tradition. That this school children's march is what the chapter of the chapter I have coming out in the book with the University of Hawaii Press, like at the end of this month, is about looking at how the school children's march sort of reincorporates the contemporary North Koreans into these sort of mythological sort of journeys, and and absorbs the energy from these topographies from the struggle period, and how people are supposed to bring it into their own lives and sort of continue to fight the sort of fight of the 1930s now in 2021, which would be especially important since 2021 is classed as another arduous March period because of COVID. So that is one aspect of my research, which has built the book on Kim Jong-suk, on myth and transformation in North Korean landscape, and how landscapes get transformed by the mythologies and the mythography of North Korea, and they also transform the people in them, or they're supposed to transform the people in them. So Andreas, I'm about to move on to a second section. Would it be a good time to go for a break?
We may have a break now. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, that's we can decide that. We are the masters of this class.
Yes.
Or you in the first place. Yeah, and yeah. So when will we meet again? Or I mean, when will you go on?
Oh, like how long do you have a break for?
Well, normally it's 15 minutes, but still we can decide, you know, on our own how much time we take. So
I don't mind. 15 minutes is fine.
15 minutes is fine. Well, let's say that we will meet maybe 20 past. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah. So I think it's very captivating, and I'm looking forward to you going on. So we will meet at 20 past, right? Mm?
Yes, is that okay for everyone?
Mm? Thank you.
You can't, surely, you know, there's only so much of you can take without a cup of tea or something like that.
Yes, yes, of course, yeah. Good, yeah.
Thank you.
See you soon again. Yeah. Mm.
So I'm just going to turn
And
my
I
camera
will
off.
keep this on because you know it has to be in one piece, and maybe you can cut it.
Oh yeah, I have video
I-
editing software, so I can edit this out. Yeah.
Super, yeah, because I mean I've partly written down what should be cut out, maybe you know some little mood moments. Mm? Yeah,
Yes.
thank you, Robert. It's great, and yeah, have a good break, and I will just mute myself and switch off my video, but otherwise I'm here. Mm.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you very much. Well, I'll just mute.
Oh,
I said
you-
I'll just mute myself and stop the video, and then I'll be back. Yeah.
yes, good. Mhm.
Bye. Hello.
Hello. In your honor, I made some black tea, which I normally don't. Adding some milk.
Because I'm British and drink a lot of tea.
Yeah, okay. Well,
Yeah.
my vice is coffee.
Yes, I mean, I'm actually drinking coffee at the moment myself, so.
Okay, so let's go on. Please, participants.
Yes.
Again, I ask you to be visible as long as somehow possible, because it's, I think, nicer for the speaker. And yeah, we may go on, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Right, can you see my slides again?
Yes. And I suppose you will enlarge them. Yeah.
Yes, there you go.
Good.
So the next part of what I was going to say is essentially it's basically rooted on the things I've been doing since 2015, 2016. So after my PhD, I ended up at Australian National University in Canberra, in Australia, writing about fishing. So having looked at forests, moving on to talk about fishing, one of the big early campaigns of Kim Jong-un was this idea of forests, mountains, and seas of gold. Yeah, so having North Korea and North Korean developmental policy think more about extracting value from forests and mountains and sea. And I obviously talked about forests, but and in when I was doing my PhD, one of the things that I looked at was coastal reclamation, and as well as forestry. So I looked at historical geographies of forests in North Korea and coasts, but I never really got beyond the coast. So I spent a lot of time when I was doing fieldwork in North Korea in coastal reclamation projects, looking at the sea, but I never got to go on the sea. So next thing I wanted to do was to think more about North Korea's engagement with the sea and fishing, and that's where all of this work comes from. So it's also from a geography's perspective, so thinking about charismatic topography from this perspective, coupled with this idea of mobilities. Just like we think of the other things, the materials in North Korean, in the public mind about North Korea, the complicated, uncomfortable, unwanted materials like nuclear material or explosive material, or even today thinking about like computer viruses from North Korea. So sort of dangerous computer software. Think about mobility and immobility in relation to North Korea. So the classic ones thinking about the mobility of North Korea's weapons, but then the immobility thinking about the sort of permanently stuck seeming status quo of division on the Korean peninsula, and the fact that it's very difficult, complicated to get to North Korea, complicated to get things from North Korea, and complicated for North Koreans to travel. This is obviously especially true in COVID times. But so these are the sort of mobilities and immobilities we normally think about. And so one of the ways of thinking about that also is thinking about the legal immobilities of things from North Korea's landscape and topography, and those are things. The legal immobilities come from the United Nations Security Council sanctions against it, and HRH 757, which is the act of Congress in the United States, which essentially predicates what North Korea would have to do from the United States perspective to free itself from these sanctions, and that's essentially to not be North Korea anymore. But United Nations sanctions are interesting because they sanction things, material objects and topography from North Korea that are never normally sanctioned. So North Korea, you can't buy or sell sea cucumbers from North Korea. You can't buy or sell wooden planks from North Korea. And North Korean and planks, wooden planks, pieces of wood, other sort of crustaceans and mollusks. It's illegal for them to travel from North Korea for money from somewhere else to somewhere else. So these things, these are very interesting legal mobilities which don't affect. I don't know if there are any other examples where sea cucumbers have been sanctioned, for example. Normally sanctions are about dual use or materials for weapons or luxury goods. They're never really about like basic foodstuffs. So these are interesting legal mobilities. And so from mobilities, I come to there's another set of literature which derives from mobility studies, which is a subsect of human geography, which looks at the sort of processes, landscapes, and infrastructures of movement, the things that make movement possible in our world, and how they fit in with globalization. This is obviously a massive field, developing more into infrastructure these days, but you know, has been since the world has been so hypermobile for many decades now, and that's one of the reasons why COVID was able to get everywhere so quickly. It's a very important sort of set of literature. And my work on these mobilities are twinned with ideas from histories of fishing, the development of fishing technology, fisheries science, fishing's place in colonization and political power after 1945, specifically in the Pacific, and community fishing histories of Asia. So there are not many, to be honest. Most fishing histories, most work on history, most work on the topographies of fishing communities and on fishing in general, it looks at the Atlantic and looks at whaling, and herring fisheries. So they're rare, but they do exist. So there's Norbeck's work on Takashima and the Inland Sea, communities in Japan, John Butcher's work on Southeast Asian fishing in the last 150 years, and Han Sang-bok, who's one of the founding members of the anthropology department at Seoul National University, who wrote a book called Korean Fishermen, Ecological Adaptation in 3 Communities, which became super important to me and as basically like basically the only book on Korean fishing communities in English. And I look at these. I look at when I talk about necromobilities, I talk about, this comes from ideas about sites of memory and spectral or ghostly memories. So memories of places that are ghostly or have ghosts or are decaying. And there's a lot of work in geography on that, looking at landscapes in Victorian literature, from English Victorian literature. So looking at English and American Victorian literature, I should say. So looking at sort of spectral geography and ghostly geographies in things like Henry James's The Turn of the Screw, in Edgar Allan Poe, and in like Dracula by Bram Stoker. And so people have theorized, geographers have theorized like notions about spectral geographies of capitalism and sort of post-industrial capitalism. So this is Detroit and the sort of ghostly abandoned places of capitalism. And also spectral geographies of socialism and post-socialism. So I'm sure the Czech Republic has some of these. So the one on the left obviously is the Palacký Republic in the former East German, basically the parliament building of East Germany, such as the East Germany had a parliament, which was, I visited as a child. I lived in Germany as a child and went to East Germany many times. And I have lovely memories of having a Vita Cola and an ice cream in the mezzanine cafe in that building. And of course, that building was abandoned very quickly after unification, and later discovered to be full of asbestos. So left to go derelict, and it's now been replaced by a facsimile replica of the Prussian Imperial Palace. So it's so spectral, it's not even there anymore. Obviously, Soviet communism and the Warsaw Pact and ideas about and the geographies of socialism and communism leave many sort of ghostly landscapes around around the world. Yeah. Also, I want to think about this. Sorry, that's not very nice, but spectral geographies post 9/11. So ghostly geographies of black sites and extraordinary rendition, and the ghostly spaces of the European migrant crisis, which is still going on in lots of places. These are not dead people; these are just life vests. And so the sort of memories of journeys and the memories of the people lost at sea and that sort of stuff. And these ghostly geographies and spectral geographies and geographies of memory and stuff like that connect with ideas about necromobility. So necromobility is the mobility of dead things, dead materials, dead beings, dead fish, dead anything, dead animal products around the world. And this is very much connected in with the notion of scientific rational thinking about fishing, which I won't talk too much about, but there's this idea about maximum sustainable yield and surplus populations of fish, which abstracts the fish to almost not be living beings, and is really only interested in their dead bodies and their dead parts, their oils and their flesh for transport. So we all know, I won't talk too much about this because I've got a lot of slides on this. So there's a development of technology in fishing, which transforms the geography, the sort of technological ability of fishing and the amount of fish they can catch. It transforms the geographies of the deep sea. So trawling on the seabed changes the geography of the ocean floor. It causes fish population collapses around the world. It causes a change in the size and age of fish. So the fish globally that we see now are not the same fish that they used to be. So in a sense, my idea is that we make ghosts of fish, and we fish down the trophic level. So we start off with the larger fish species, we fish them out, and then we fish down to things like krill and jellyfish, because we've fished everything else out. So this is the development of scientific technological fishing. And this goes hand in hand with transformations of the Pacific geographies of fishing in my work. So the building of a Japanese empire of fishing after the various Sino-Japanese and Russo-Japanese wars. The bureaucracy of Pacific fishing. I'm missing a bunch of slides here. That's weird. So I don't know where they gone. I thought I'd put them in. Excuse me. No, I didn't put them in. That's frustrating. Well, I've got less slides. That's fine. So yeah, these Pacific geographies of fishing, which place Japan along with the United States at the heart of both pre-war and post-war geographies of fishing in the Pacific in particular. Even though Japan loses the Second World War, it's basically held to be an important partner by the United States, and so it is deeply involved in the scientific bureaucracies of Pacific fishing, such as all of these fisheries commissions, whose job it is to make fish's journeys and make the topographies of fish's lives knowable. So in the past, it was impossible to know whose fish was whose, so you couldn't tell where a fish, like a migratory fish, like a salmon, came from. So you couldn't say which river they came from, because salmon spawn at the same place they were born. So salmon make these long migratory journeys from the place where they're born out to the deep sea and then back to the same place to give birth themselves, and then they die. But they start off in a particular river and come back to that river. So that's what's called an anadromous fish. And it's important for the country who manages those rivers to conserve them well, because they can really damage the salmon populations. And so it's important in this new Pacific science fish bureaucracy of scientific fishing in the Pacific to know where those fish start off. And in the past, that's impossible. But these fisheries commissions and the developing science of Japan, America, and Canada mean that, and the Soviet Union, mean that developments in knowledge about gut bacteria and gut parasites in fish mean that it's capable to trace which river bacteria and which river parasites in the fish's guts, means so that you can say essentially that fish came from that river. So it becomes possible to say who's a Japanese fish, who's an American fish, and who's a Canadian fish. And so over decades and decades, it's possible to sort of get a sense of whose fish are whose. and then to conserve them. And obviously North Korea doesn't play much of a part in this, or I wondered whether it did, because North Korean fishing is always important to North Korea. So just like forests and just like other stuff is important to North Korea, fishing as a fish as a vital free resource from the global commons in the sea is a huge deal for North Korea. And so fishing has always been important, although it was like other parts of the North Korean developmental history, environmental history, it's goes through a number of different stages. So it starts off as like cooperatives, so cooperatives go out to fish, but now it's and these are the fishing cooperatives I met. So this is I went to. So this is Shindo. This is Kim Jong-un visiting Shindo. So Shindo is an island on the mouth of the Yalu Amnok River, and it's got a small fisheries cooperative that were put there in 1971. So Shindo was reclaimed from the sea in the 60s and 70s. It's the newest North Korean province or local district. Yellow line above there is China. So this also is a contested space, a bit like Shindo, a bit like Pegdasan, interestingly. So there's lots of issues about where the border is and disputes about the border. At one point, North Korea basically steals an island off China and incorporates it into this, which doesn't go down well, and makes the problem still in sort of diplomatic relations. But anyway, so this is Shindo. I visited here. This is one of the major projects in my part of my field work. It was important in the 1970s to North Korea as a fishing cooperative, but fisheries cooperatives get replaced by the Korean People's Army. That's the Army Fishing Brigade visiting Mangyongdae, Mangyongdae, the birthplace of Kim Il-sung, on the top left. So the army takes over the fishing post 1992 and runs the fisheries stations, which are very, very industrial, not really focused on communities. The topographies are also very industrial and sort of not really about community fishing or the cooperatives. And so the cooperatives get left behind completely. And so Shindo, where I visited, although the island is still there and the fishing cooperative is still there, it's not really allowed to go to sea very much because it gets in the way of larger boats, and it also gets in the way of the Chinese, who don't want small North Korean boats in the way of their ships. And there's also very little to catch in that part of the water. It's the Bohai Sea, the estuary mouth of the Yalu, and the ecology is quite bad now. The number of mollusk species has collapsed. And so for North Korea, they've suggested that actually the whole island redevelop its refocus its geography towards the agriculture of reed production and using reeds to produce natural fibers for paper in Shinwiju. So it's moving away from fishing. I won't talk about this. So yeah, I've done a lot of work. Actually, I might talk a little bit about this. So looking for North Korean fishing interests in the Pacific, I presumed that they would be illegal, essentially. There'll be North Korean illegal boats, but it turned out that in fact North Korean deep sea fishing was almost non-existent, and that any illegal fishing that the Chinese, the Japanese, the Americans, and the Canadians found was by Taiwanese boats in the 1970s from the various fisheries commissions. But there's an interesting history, and I did research on this in the State Archive of the Economy in Moscow. There's an interesting history between the North Korea and the Soviet Union and Russia in the Sea of Okhotsk and Kamchatka. So Kamchatka and the Sea of Okhotsk were very important to Russia and the very important to the Soviet Union, still very important to the Russian Federation now, for conserving salmon and crabs, king crabs, and various populations of rare squid. And the Soviet Union found that North Korea was constantly poaching them and diminishing the numbers of fish. And so it sought to engage with North Korea on research exercises to basically stop them poaching and do something productive with their collaboration. And so North Korea and Soviet Union actually negotiated for a decade to set up a joint fisheries commission, which they finally set up in 1970. And I was interested in this. This commission gets mentioned a lot in North Korean news. Every couple of years it meets. They talk about it a lot, but obviously you never see the documents for this from this commission. But I found that the documents actually exist in the state archive of the economy, in the Soviet Union section of that, in Moscow. And so I was able to access the various documents about the Fisheries Commission and about this particular series of meetings. And so they spent ages negotiating this in 1970, and it was due to start on the 29th of September 1970. But on the 28th of September 1970, this urgent telegram appears on the desk of institutions across the Soviet Union, which essentially says that a North Korean boat has deliberately set its nets and weights across the nets and infrastructure of the primary research boats from the Soviet Union, destroying its nets and damaging all of the equipment. And it looks essentially that other North Korean boats have done that all across the Soviet Union, and that North Korea's perhaps deliberately sabotaged the entire research exercise. But North Korea, which is, so basically the research project can't continue, but the Soviet Union continues to attempt to engage North Korea in this, in these projects of research to stop them poaching and doing sort of illegal fishing activity. But North Korea, in the other way, continues to attempt to fish illegally. It sends spies embedded with fisheries research exercises, and even as late as 1989, 1990, the Soviet Union found North Korean fisheries trying to steal from its waters, and employing Japanese boats to pretend to be Japanese rather than North Korean. So I talked about these. This sort of difficult history of North Korean fishing continues. I talked about these sanctions, but of course all the sanctions are predicated on the fact that any of the fish that North Koreans catch actually lands at a port. But in reality, most North Korean fish and most North Korean materials get offloaded in the middle of the sea to ship transfer. So they never make it to port. So therefore the ship will arrive wearing the flag of a different country. So that's how North Korea gets around a bit. And these necromobilities, I wanted to talk about, put them in a different perspective, talking about international necromobilities, so the movement of dead people, the movement of animal products, the movement of human organs around the world, and in Asia in particular, the necromobilities of fish, so bits of fish, and the important geographies and places where those bits of fish get transported through. So raisin shark fins in Hong Kong and Singapore, for example. There's sort of whole there's an industry of necromobilities, of products of dead materials from fish in those cities. This also includes contemporary Japanese whaling, interestingly, and historical Japanese whaling. So if you think about where I'm going, is that there are interesting and uncomfortable North Korean bodies involved in this, and whaling produces uncomfortable, unwelcome, and difficult bodies to deal with in the past. So in the early modern Japan, for example, Buddhist traditions in Japan at the time meant that, if you prevented something from having a chance to have a life, that was a terrible, terrible, terrible cosmic faux pas, if you liked. And unfortunately for Japanese whaling, which was mainly artisanal at the time and carried out by small community boats, no one had really learned how to sex a whale by this point. And sometimes whalers would catch a whale which would turn out to be a pregnant female with a fetus inside, a fetal whale, and when they cut it open, the fetal whale would be there, and they would have prevented that fetal whale from having a life, and that was a terrible spiritual faux pas. And the whalers brought those bodies back onto land and buried them in graveyards, in the shrine yards of shrines in northern Honshu and Hokkaido, and buried them like people. And so you'll see this is a gravestone of a whale in Honshu, and they gave them human names. So they're like, Akita, whale, those surnames, just first names. So this way, the bodies of these uncomfortable, these unwanted and complicated animals were brought on land into the sort of spiritual geography of Japan. And this is where I talk about the necromobilities of North Korean ghost ships, another necromobility relation to fishing in North Korea. This is the phenomena of I'm sorry for the images. I'll move that on in case people get upset about it. this is the phenomena starting in 2011 when the bodies of the boats, old wooden boats, started washing up on the shores of Japan, often with the bodies of dead North Koreans inside, so skeletal crews. It was clear that the boats had been at sea for a long time, and basically the people had starved and died, and then, you know, decomposed while the boat arrived. And this problem started off small, but over the next 10 years, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these boats arrived on the shores of Japan, and the markings on them and other things like on the clothes that people were wearing identified them as North Korean, coming from North Korea. And so at one point there were hundreds of these showing up on the shores of Japan, and this was hugely concerning for the Japanese and Japanese media. People worrying whether this was North Korea implanting spies into Japan again, whether there was new abduction campaigns, because North Korea used to abduct Japanese people from the coasts by mini submarine, whether any of these bodies had diseases, so there's tremendous fear of disease. These created a massive problem for local bureaucracies in Japan, and essentially, basically, they happen because North Korean coastal communities are under tremendous pressure to go to sea to extract fish from the sea, and even if they don't necessarily have the capabilities to do so. So North Koreans will get pressured by their local party unit or work unit to become fishermen, even if they're not actually fishermen, and they never they get these very old-fashioned boats, they get very insufficient engines, they don't have the skills, they don't have the capabilities to deal with the weather or the navigation, and so they get lost and they just disappear sometimes if the weather gets bad, and they float for weeks and weeks. It's 500 miles from one coast to the other, so they float for weeks and weeks and weeks on the current. They only have 36 horsepower engines, and unfortunately they die, and they often do it at night as well. The image on the right hand side top there is night fishing by North Korean boats in the Yamamoto Bank in the Sea of Japan, East Sea. And so much so that they get pressured so much that Chongqing, the major fishing town in North Korea on that coast, is called Widow's Town. It's nicknamed Widow's Town for the number of widows created by the number of men lost at sea. It's a very dark thing. So it essentially demonstrates a lot about the developmental pressure that communities are under, and the power and the power that North Korea's government and institutions are willing to bring to bear on coastal communities to push them out to sea in order to catch fish. It's a huge deal, and they're mainly after rainbow squid. These North Korean bodies are problematic for Japan. Often they are, it's not possible to return them to North Korea because North Korea don't have diplomatic relations with Japan. And sometimes they can be returned through the North Korean Residents Association in Japan, but it depends on the local area, because some areas get on very badly with their local North Korean group, and so they often are cremated and kept in shrines in local shrines by the sea, and this is a particular Shinto Buddhist shrine, where the priest keeps North Koreans, cremated North Koreans, and so these dead North Koreans and their uncomfortable bodies get sort of incorporated into the sort of shrine architecture and the sort of cultural geographies of Japan, even though their bodies are very uncomfortable and hard to deal with for the Japanese. I mean, this is like this is the pre-COVID story. This is the really interesting. I did all this research on this, wrote this book, wanted to carry on with it, but COVID basically put paid to this. In 2020, North Korea's boats didn't go out. So because North Korea didn't want its boats and its fishing fleets to engage anywhere in case they spread COVID back into North Korea. And so North Korea's fleets were replaced by what these called Chinese dark fleets. So these are boats, Chinese fishing boats, sailing around with their transponders off in North Korean waters, fishing because North Korea had sold the rights to fish to China so that it could extract some money from the sea. But these have become incredibly problematic around the world. So these vast Chinese fleets of dark boats, they're dark because they don't have transponders on, become very problematic. There's some really interesting writing about this. And this sort of illustrates the North Korea's retreat from the sea. So basically in COVID, during COVID times, North Korea not only recalled its fleets, its fishing fleets, but basically nearly all of its merchant shipping back to North Korea. So yeah, so this story is very much a pre-2020 story. I don't know where it will go after COVID, or if there isn't after COVID. But anyway, for North Korea. But anyway, or if there isn't after COVID, who knows? But that's interesting for that to happen. You know, there have been barely any boats. I think one or two since 2020, which is an abrupt change. So that's the work on fishing. I wanted to talk briefly because I've been talking for a while, and I want you to have time to ask questions about future directions for research and these charismatic topographies, and also work on fieldwork, theorizing fieldwork related to North Korea. So, like as Andreas said, I own 2 horses, so this inspired me to think about North Korean horse geographies, so equine topography, if you like. So this builds out of work on animal-human studies, and there's a lot of writing about the place of the horse in human history, political history, and social history, and our relationships with horses, you know, as a society. And it reminds me of, obviously, in the Korean context, horses are important cosmically and spiritually, going a long way back, all the way back to characters like Chonma, the heavenly horse from 6th century Schiller, and characters like the horse spirit general, and this connection with Kwanlima, the flying horse from Chinese mythology, which gets absorbed in North Korea into this idea of Cholima, so the Kwanlima, Cholima. It's a horse that can fly 1,000 li in a day. So not only can it fly 400 miles, 1,000 li in a single day. So the key takeaway is it's a massively fast horse, and it's also like a superhero horse. Yeah. So the idea of Cholima, it gets absorbed in the idea of revolutionary speed, so that workers in North Korea, North Koreans themselves, should work at Cholima speed, like at the speed of the 1,000 li horse. Yeah. So everyone should work at the speed of this magical flying horse, and in that development is organized that way. So horses are, and the riding of particular horses is super important, particularly white stallions. Important in sort of relatively recent Asian history in terms of the various performativity aspects of it when it comes to imperial Japanese emperors. So Emperor Meiji, Taisho, Hirohito, Emperor Showa, always seen on horses, connecting to sort of like European ideas about like horsemanship and kingship. And so it's important, not just cosmically, but politically. And so my work looks at Kim Il-sung and his famous white horse. So in 1933, in his biography, Kim Il-sung gets given a horse, which basically appears like much of the topography and landscape that I talked about from the first part of my talk. The horse is a Japanese horse originally, I think, but it like chooses the Koreans. So its Japanese owner is shot and by the Koreans, and the horse runs towards the people that shoots it as if to choose them as its next owner. Yeah. So, and of course they say the Japanese officers must have been cruel to this horse, otherwise it wouldn't have come over as soon as its master fell. Yeah, so naturally Japanese is cruel, miserable. The horse chooses the Koreans, and the horse that this horse gets basically given to Kim Il-sung by his guerrilla fighters because they feel like he needs a horse. He's got like his leg is hurting from all the marching, so they feel he should have the horse because he's their leader, and because he's in pain, and it would make him more effective and more comfortable. He's like ever the selfless person. He's always trying to tell them to not give it to him, but he takes it on, and they become a bit of a team. So Kim Il-sung writes very, very affectionately. When I say writes, this is supposed to be his autobiography, but whether he wrote this or not is another matter. He writes very affectionately about this horse, and they become like friends. Like they become like very much like his pet horse, yeah. And he's incredibly emotional about it when it dies. But the horse does like interestingly superhero style things too. So at some points in the story, the horse actually hurts its own legs to prevent Kim Il-sung getting burnt. It falls over deliberately so that the snow on the ground can put the fire. Kim Il-sung's coats come on fire because of being fired at, and the horse rolls to the ground and puts the fire on Kim Il-sung's coat out, and doing so really hurts its legs. But it does so to serve its master. So yeah, so this horse becomes a classic important part of this autobiography, and it gets reproduced into, or reprojected into sort of North Korean political imagery. So this is the what is his name? His name is Jong Kwan-chol, the painter, the famous people's painter, one of the most important painters of this period in North Korea. He paints a picture of Kim Il-sung on the famous white horse, and the horse, this is in the National Gallery, now the Korean Revolution Museum in Pyongyang. And the horse becomes a sort of like artistic trope, the faithful white horse. So you see lots and lots of imagery of the faithful white horse in all sorts of fantastical situations. So on the left, this sort of could be Lake Samji, who knows? Beautiful, beautiful woodcut prints. And on the right-hand side, you've got this painting, which is a classic North Korean painting, for all that's said in it in a sort of totally implicit way, and nothing is explicit. So the white horse is here in this scene. So the two kids are reading with materials that the great leader has brought with him to educate them to become socialist young women like Kim Jong-suk. There's a female gorilla there waiting. The leader's boots are outside the thing because he's polite. The old lady of the house is doing sticky rice in the background for the leader. She's making the effort to make sticky rice, and they've cut wood to have a bit of a feast. So the leader is at home, and people are treating him to the nicest food. He's done some physical effort. He's been polite. He's given this kids materials for education of the children. So there's a lot, and the faithful white horse is waiting there, and so that's how you know he's there. I mean, it's an amazing painting, to be honest. Anyway, so you get a lot of these sort of imagery, and these sort of connect with other sort of the equine imaginary in North Korea. So classic Kim Jong-il paintings where he looks just ridiculous on backs of horses, and recent uses of white horses and sort of famous horses, including the Kim Jong-un and the Politburo of North Korea's trip up Mount Paektu a couple of years ago, and the sort of elite spaces of North Korea, such as the Mirin Riding Club in Pyongyang, and the fact that horses are such an important part of that sort of Pyongyang elite and the Donju the sort of topographies which they inhabit in Pyongyang. So that's the horses. The other thing I wanted to talk about was soil and earth and manure. So this builds on the work of a man called Salvatore Engel de Mauro, who wrote a book called Soil Ecology and the Left, thinking about socialist or left-wing perspectives on soil science. And so just like trees and other developmental things, soil is always really important to North Korea. North Korea is renowned for having really heavily over-chemicalized its agricultural processes. In the 1960s, at one point it was using up to 4 tons of fertilizer per hectare, which is an enormous amount. And that created a certain level of soil death. So the soil becomes unproductive because it's just worked out, yeah? And so the rehabilitation of that soil is massively important to North Korea. This connects with this Korean soil barrenness is a bit of a political trope. So in the colonial period for the Japanese, you know, Japanese could only conceive of Korean soils as being barren. In South Korea in the 1960s, Park Chung-hee and the South Korean government also saw their soils as barren and degraded after the Korean War and a developmental lack of capacity at the beginning of South Korea. And people use ideas about soil barrenness and the barrenness in particular of its landscapes to delegitimize North Korea as a whole. I mean, they're barren, you know, they've been barren because wood is important for fuel and it's hard to get hold of in North Korea, fuel, and people don't have the money to buy it. So chop down all the trees near towns. And also during the famine period, they ate all of the vegetable matter on the ground to have something to eat. So, so it became quite barren. But we use the fact that North Korea's barrenness, or the sort of the sort of deforested spaces and the sort of lack of plants in places to delegitimize it. Some people use it to delegitimize it as sort of weaponize the barrenness of North Korea. But North Korea and Korea has a long history of productive ground and productive soil. So this comes from minerals, for example, the valuable soil with minerals, as seen by Carl Christian Goethe, the geologist in 1884 and 1885, and the development of rich mines in the north of North Korea in the late 19th century and into the 1940s, and still now the mining for gold, rare earths, uranium, that sort of stuff. And also, like I talked about, the sort of construction of coastal reclamation, the sort of construction of new soil and land in North Korea is very important, just like Singapore and Hong Kong, who have challenged amounts of land. They don't have much land, so it's important for them to build new land and to reclaim what they can. North Korea doesn't have much land that's flat, and so because it's very much more mountainous in South Korea. And so the reclamation of land to be flat land, flat productive farmland, is also very important. So there's a massive amount of the construction of new land and the rehabilitation of coastal land with new soils in North Korea. And the use of manure, humus, H-U-M-U-S, not the food stuff, but manure essentially in North Korea. Use of that stuff, use of humus fertilizer as fertilizer is a huge deal in North Korea, and there are campaigns about it every year. You see these the trucks full of manure travel all over the country. And the local units, agricultural units, spend ages and ages, like basically piling this stuff on the ground to sort of try and revitalize the ground. It's an important part of the political calendar. So you get what I call it a soil politics of contemporary North Korea. So you get these places where the rich sort of scientific soils in these vegetable greenhouses that get visited by Kim Jong-un are like the sort of peak of North Korean agriculture, and the soil is like the richest. And then you get the sort of right-hand slides, sort of like the local work unit and sort of agricultural processes of like maintaining and managing soils, including at rice transplantation, and how rich soils and productive landscape forms a part of the sort of like narrative of North Korean politics in both its propaganda and newspaper news in media and stuff like that. So this is something I'm working on now, and there's some field work to talk about. Oh, I thought that was final. So one last set of things is talking about watery leisure topographies in North Korea. So looking at water spaces and places of fun and leisure in Pyongyang in particular. So looking at Munsu Water Park and other water parks around North Korea, about the reconstruction of the River Taedong as an axis of leisure. So Benjamin Juano's talked a lot about axes of politics in North Korea and Pyongyang, the reorganization of Pyongyang's urban geography, so it fits better with the politics and ideology of the country. And so this has been a sort of reorganization the riverbanks of the Taedong River to be a sort of leisure space where people can be leisurely as well as political, if you check their mobile phones. And you see these in sort of the number of sort of moments of where children get watery spaces and water places of fun in the water. They get reconstructed into their sort of health narratives and narratives of things like orphanages. And so you get all these orphanages with fun parks. And the fact that after a busy campaign of developing a new weapon or like taking in the harvest, scientists and bureaucrats get rewarded with visits to these watery spaces. So they get to visit the fun parks, the water spaces, the dolphinarium. They get to see a seal show there on the right-hand side. And so these watery spaces are part of like everyday life, but they're also part of the sort of political timetable and sort of off reward processes. And particularly looking at Potong Riverside. So Potong was the small river that runs into the Taedong in Pyongyang, the site of the first reclamation project in North Korea's history in 1946. It's currently the site of this huge new sort of apartment complex, which is about mimicking organic forms and creating a sort of leisure space for sort of elite party memberships to live, which is organic and sort of so much more based on walking rather than driving. And Wonsan Kalma, which is what I say is like a watery leisure future. So this is Wonsan Kalma in the past, where it was a fairly undeveloped beach on the East Sea, and it's being redeveloped into this basically leisure spot, hotel complexes for the future, along with many visits from Kim Jong-un with this. There's many different styles of hotel, like a private apartment, all focused around water leisure, leisure by the water and fun, but also volumetric, watery regional politics, as I say. So this whole idea is not just for North Koreans, it's so that North Korea can capture part of the Chinese tourist market to sort of create Wonsan Kalma as a place where budget tourists from Northeast China would have an alternate leisure destination than the resorts in the south of China around Hainan Island. And North Korea could provide that budget beach destination. So they built, along with the various new hotels, they built a brand new international airport where a lot of the signs are in Chinese as well as Korean. It's not open yet, so it's currently waiting for the end of COVID as well, I presume. So this is what North Korea sees as a sort of like a charismatic topography of the future, one that's productive, about fun, leisure, and money generation, basically. So I just wanted to say one more thing about fieldwork. So I've done a lot of fieldwork in North Korea. And there are not that many photos that I can show you. Not really any photos that I've shown you in this, but I've been to North Korea 9 times and done a lot of field work there, looking in forests, looking at coasts, looking at stock breeding, so cow breeding. There's a lot of work being done at the moment about theorizing field work in North Korea, because one thing about North Korea is it's very easy to visit North Korea and just be shown statues of Kim Il-sung for like 2 weeks. It's very easy to have someone to basically tell you that such and such a thing is very Juche oriented, or the dear leader did this, the great leader did that. It's not very easy to do things that are scientific and data driven, so it's very difficult to collect data. It's very difficult for me to bring any testing equipment to North Korea. It's almost impossible to bring testing equipment to North Korea. And part of the act of fieldwork in North Korea is performance yourself. So I talked a lot about how there's theatric politics in North Korea. One of the funny things about working in North Korea is you have to do a bit of that performance yourself. So obviously you have to, perform reverence when asked to do so. But one of the other things you have to perform is ignorance. So when I was looking at forestry projects, I did 3 months worth of work in a forestry project in North Korea. One of the things that I did was, before that, I went to the National Archives in the United States, and I went to the Aerial Reconnaissance Archive in the cartography room there, and I looked at the film reels from the cameras on US spy planes, US U-2 spy planes, and the Corona project, which was a satellite project that the Americans had, where they spy satellites. And the film negatives are kept in the Aerial Reconnaissance Archive, and you can bring up by latitude and longitude all the photos from a particular place that the Americans have taken over the years. And so I picked that forestry project I knew I was going to in North Korea, and was able to look at this forestry project in North Korea and see how the forestry project had developed over like 30 years. Now, when I went there, I mean, obviously I'd learned a lot from that, but when I went there, I could not say any of that, you know, and so I had to perform a certain level of ignorance. Otherwise, you know, where did you know about this? Oh, you saw this forest change. Why? Oh yeah, I know about that. Why do you know about that? Because I looked at US aerial reconnaissance photography. You know, that is the quickest way to end up getting in jail in North Korea. So you have to sort of perform a certain level of ignorance, yeah. And you know, that can be quite difficult, and you have to frame your questions and your data collection in a way that that also includes that performance of ignorance, and you have to write a little bit afterwards with a little bit to, you know, in a way which meets that, so you don't you know, I mean, you can't reveal sources in quite the same way that you would in other places. So it's an interesting performance. You have to perform slightly when you get there, and that makes fieldwork collection difficult, data collection difficult, and but not without use. And so there's a great book, The Reason That I Have a Right, on the Right, and literally published a couple of days ago by Valérie Gelazeux and Benjamin Joanneau in French by the Atelier de Cahiers in France on Terre de Terrain, which is all about fieldwork. So Valerie and I started off a project on this at the AKSE conference in 2014 on problems of fieldwork, methodologies of fieldwork in North Korea, and it's great to see that it's like appeared in French first, you know. So there's this fantastic book in French. It is good, and there's a lot of work by going on at the moment, not just by Valérie Gelazeux, but by people like Elizabeth Chabanol, who has done work on archaeology in North Korea and how to do archaeology, and also Kunde Kuster, who from Leiden University, and his work on art and art collection and sort of engagement with the art community in North Korea. So, you know, fieldwork is hard, it's difficult to theorize, and the methods are complicated, but it is possible. But it requires a certain level of thinking and performance, and I hope that this shows, this presentation touches on that a little bit. I realized that I didn't actually include the slides from my field work in South Korea or China, so I'm sorry, I should have done that. So in fact, I had already done that, but I think I must have opened the wrong screen share. But since I've been talking for a really long time, I'm going to stop here and ask if there are any questions, and if there's anything you want to talk or anything else about.
Yeah, thank you very much, Robert. In the first place, of course, I mean, there should be questions. Yeah, I think these were really, well, this was a wide array, and I suppose that maybe some of you are overwhelmed. How about making yourself visible for this part of the class? Thank you. Johanna, who had been with us from the start, wrote that her Wi-Fi collapsed and she sadly cannot join us anymore. That's a bit, yeah, that was the first student who had who was here even before me. Okay, I mean, in this frame. Well, I mean, I usually have all kinds of questions, but let's collect a bit from you, please. Shall I invite you to ask? Let's collect a few. Anashi, you usually have questions.
Yeah,
as well.
I, to be honest, don't have any questions. I'm just maybe like overwhelmed, as as you showed at the end, that they are trying to build like new complexes for Chinese tourists to visit, and with like the comparison how we see North Korea and how the people are living there. So yeah, that's like what I'm getting from it. Like, yeah, the contrast between those two.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to say that not every North Korean will be able to go to those places. Yeah, we have an idea about North Koreans as oppressed, poor, lacking in resources, no options, only like peasants working in the fields. And many North Koreans are like that. Yeah. so that is the world of many North Koreans. But there is an elite of a couple of million North Koreans who are higher up in the party. They live in Pyongyang. They work for the army, or they work for like local bureaucracy and higher up local bureaucracy. And for them, they can go to places like that. And the area that is being redeveloped in Wonsan will not be for local North Koreans. So local people that live in Wonsan or around Wonsan will not be able to go to the hotel there. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a money-making scheme, essentially. Do you know what I mean? It's a way of capturing a market, a bit of value from a market that North Korea believes there is a market for, relatively working class Chinese who live in the northeast of China, who, it may be expensive for them to visit Hainan and the islands of the south, the coasts of the south of China, and it would be much quicker and cheaper for them to go to North Korea. Yeah, and the beach is good. Yeah, so so that's the market it's aiming at, like low cost. Yeah, and they won't meet normal North Koreans either. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. So I'm not trying to say that regular North Koreans, that your farm machinist in an agricultural collective is going to be able to visit Wonsan, for a holiday.
Yeah, there is also one very trivial side of it, I think. In fisherman's house, you don't eat fish. And that's an old proverb.
Yeah.
Of the region where you grew up, Robert, Hamburg, maybe.
Yes.
So, I mean, you maybe also have those local sites that you never visited as a local, but the tourists flock in for that. Okay, but yes. I mean that's only can I say? I mean that's only an anecdote. Yeah. I'm not sure whether how much I can press you for questions. I mean, if I would start, I think one of the fascinating things here is, how geographers manage to put a label on things that we maybe observed and watched, but still we would not identify it as something in its own right, like a spectral geography, a geography of places where ghosts have some role, or maybe where you have only the remnants of a lively past, but now everything is dead. Or I mean, there is a number of such things. Like
yes,
just a moment. Yeah. So I think it's very nice to reflect on this kind of thinking. It creates new fields. It creates. I mean, you have to imagine there are people who want to make a living from academia, and then they identify. We could make such a not a business, but we could create such a field and then be the first to position ourselves there.
Well, it does happen.
Macro mobilities. I mean, that's wonderful. Yeah.
Yes. I can't, that's not my invention. Yeah. So I wish that was my invention.
You
But
applied it to North Korea, huh? Yeah.
yes, it's my, I'm the first person to apply it to North Korea. But, you know, necromobility is actually a huge, if you think about the sort of things that North Korea are famous for, it's actually a hugely important aspect relating to North Korea, not just the movement of like dead materials for eating, but like the fact that North Koreans die often when crossing the border, and many North Koreans are executed. And Sarah Son at Sheffield has done this fantastic piece of work with other people on mapping bodies. So taking the taking the witness statements from people who know that their family members were killed in particular places during the famine period or executed for politics, and they know where they're buried, and then creating a map of the places where all these people are buried. That's, I mean, that's huge. The necropolitics of it is enormous. And so in the future, that will become even more, if in the future, if there is not a North Korea, if North Korea ceases to exist or unification happens of some sort, the undoing of all of that and the sort of finding of these necro materials will be hugely important for justice and reconciliation and things like that. So
yeah, you have that in South Korea just as well. I mean, actually, there are many mass graves that are still not
of course, yeah,
dug out. I mean, there was a lot done, but
yeah,
then the commission was dissolved and it sort of slowed down.
Yes,
yeah,
but I mean, I think it's like it's an important thing, and like the sort of the movement and the flow of either the dead bodies of things or the parts of things that were once alive is a very important part of contemporary economic logistics. Yeah, and sort of like development, and so I think it's very interesting to apply it to North Korea.
Yeah, the geographies of mobilities would be even the bigger. Huh?
Yes, absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not a mobility studies person, but there are whole departments of mobility studies now. Do you know what I mean? And it's also growing into infrastructure studies. Yeah. So there's a whole department at National University of Singapore all on infrastructure logistics studies, and they have like postdocs and stuff like that. So it's very interesting to see. You know.
Yeah, and I mean in the sense of cultural studies still. I mean, not about, people who would design your or plan your next subway, but and I mean that's brilliant. And I mean, isn't that also one of, I mean, didn't that strike you to some extent? Let me ask you, Monica Shea, were you aware that such studies exist?
No, I wasn't.
Yeah, maybe you could, now start what field you could invent that still doesn't. Yeah. And be the.
I mean, human geography is geography is a very interesting discipline because it's basically split down the middle. So on one side you have the physical geographers, which is all very pure science. You know, glaciology, meteorology, sort of hydrological flow, that sort of stuff. And on the other side, you have human geographers, who the physical geographers can't stand, who you know, actually change all the time. You know, so the sort of human geography looks at all different ways that sort of humans and societies and social impact transforms landscape and is transformed by the landscape itself, and that changes all the time. So new things happen, new changes happen, new impacts happen, and so as that happens, the subject really changes. You know, so human geography is a very creative discipline. You know.
Yeah, you know, if I would now, well, let's say. Walk out and tell my sister, for example, the landscape was transformed by the stories. And she,
Yes.
I mean, my sister is not stupid, but she would like maybe question it. Yeah, you know, how can stories transform a landscape?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, is they you know, the stories and the mythology transforms the landscape, not just physically, but in
Yeah.
the minds of North Koreans and in future tellings of the story. But it does actually also change it physically in North Korea. So the fact that the stories are told about these places and the landscapes are in them mean that those landscapes are then often used by the politics and the sort of like the current version of North Korea to tell the story. So literally the landscape is told, they turn it into a basically like a tourist site or a site for preservation. And so the landscape in a sense also physically gets transformed by the mythology later on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because the people would change it a bit to make it better fit to the story, right?
Yes, that's right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, those slogan trees, for example, they cannot be the original tree. Yeah. And at Lake Samji, there's actually the birch trees where the Kim Il Sung and Kim Jong Suk are supposed to have acknowledged their relationship for the first time in 1936. They have a ceremony in front of those birch trees every year to acknowledge that moment, but they're not the same birch trees. They can't possibly be the same birch trees, yeah? But the birch trees stand in as like a witness. They're like the only living witness to this moment, but they weren't there. They're not real, you know? I mean, they are real, they're real birch trees, but they're other birch trees, you know? But then you have to think, but does that really matter? It doesn't matter to the people involved. It doesn't matter to the people who are managing the process that they're really the birch trees. It's just the birch trees, you know, they become like Cypher's avatar for the projection of this idea onto them. You know what I mean? So it's really interesting, you know.
Mm-hmm. Are there comparable cases in the Czech Republic?
Are there? What are you asking me that?
No, for example, Sabinache. Or I mean,
I don't think so.
no landscape that has been transformed by some story about Ottokar or whatever. No.
Of course, it's different from like a long time ago, but I don't think there was some drastic change, like big changes in like the North Korea or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, was there something else that somehow rang a bell? Because I mean, you have also some kind of, well, I mean, as Robert has said, I mean, it's not one-dimensional communistic North Korea. You can also say it's, some people would say it's, well, whatever, very nationalistic. It has many layers, but still, I mean, you were a communist country in it.
Maybe.
Yeah, please, Katarzyna.
I just thought like about the coal mining because that changed the landscape of, for example, my region, since I'm from Karlovy Vary. So like here it's like mountains, but also there was a lot of coal mining, which caused like making of different landscapes all around the region. And it's not just here, it's also like around Ostrava, I think. There's a lot of mining too, and those started like because those started like around the time of the socialistic regime, and it continued until now. But since now a lot of the companies that were coal mining for electricity purposes had to actually close up lately because of some restrictions, because of the environmentalism. So it's like changes based on politics, I'd say. So now there are like lakes, in not lakes, but they make lakes out of the coal mines that used to be here. So I think this is like what changes the face around here based on our cultivation.
Also in Ostrava, actually, they are not making any lakes because there was different kind of coal, black coal. So it's like this and not like this for people who don't know. And they are actually now using these places, mining places, and some of the steel factories to make cultural, like theaters and things like this. And it has really good acoustic and everything, and it's become quite popular in Ostrava. These days they hold even big festivals, so it's quite interesting. You can go there. Also, people do a lot of photo shoots there for Instagram. So if you ever go to Ostrava, you can try to visit some of these.
And also, if I can like add, but this is from Slovakia's point of view. In my hometown, we are also a mining region area, but the thing is, in the past, when the mines were still active, like a lot, the earth actually sank. So now people are not even able to live there. So that's like how it changed, at least our region, not even like building something fancy or like using it in some way. It just completely was destroyed.
There's a famous town in the north of Sweden called Kiruna, which has Sweden's biggest coal mine. And the town is there because of the coal mine. And now the coal mine has got so large that it needs the town as well. So the town has to move, yeah? So the town is moving, and the railway track, the railway line, which the town is on, is also moving to make way for the coal mine. So that does happen. And the town, it's not massively popular, but people who live in the town just accept the fact that the reason the town is there is because of this mine. And so if the mine needs the town, they will have to go, you know? So the government is moving the town like 12 miles away. Do you know what I mean? So that does happen. It's very interesting, you know? And I like the fact you were all focusing on coal mining, because in where I live, we had a big mining industry here in the UK, and our government in the 1980s made political decisions to basically reduce the number of mines, because the mining industry was very organized in terms of labor. There were lots of labor unions. And so they decided essentially the best thing to do for the economy was to break the union. And by that, they basically closed half of the industry. Yeah. And so that was a huge moment in our history in 1984. And many of the mines and the mining communities went into, you know, decline. The mines closed. Now we don't have any mines at all. And it's the spaces that those mines used to be on, the landscape of the mines is being rehabilitated into sort of nature parks and sometimes cultural theme parks. But the villages themselves are stuck in the past. Yeah, they can't get beyond the fact they are no longer mining. So they are often very resentful, very poor communities with very little infrastructure, stuck back, you know, in that time. It's very interesting, you know. We have a lot of cultural mythology about the mining conflicts and the sort of the miners' strike of 1984, and the contest. Basically, it was like a mini civil war in the UK between the government and the miners. You know what I mean? People used to stand at the top of the motorway bridges and throw bricks down on the police to stop the police from getting to the various protests. It was terrible. So there's a lot of cultural stuff produced about that. There's a lot of cultural. There's actually an artist called Jeremy Deller who did a whole film reenacting one of the big moments where the miners met the police, and they got people to pretend to be them. You know, it was extraordinary. It sort of reenacted this battle. So it's very interesting. I find it very interesting that you talked about the coal. I also, you know, North Korea has a history of, I talked about Cholimar, like revolutionary speed. And so the Soviet Union had this idea of, like Alexei Stakhanov, this idea of Stakhanovism, of like a worker who worked at a superhuman strength, superhuman speed. And and everybody should follow them. And obviously the worker, they didn't really do that, or they didn't really do what the state said, but they were presented as having done this crazy superhuman thing. And Stakhanov, it later gave the name to this idea of Stakhanovism. So there were lots of other people who worked at incredible speed and they did amazing effort and stuff like that, and you should all follow them. I wonder in the Czechoslovakia or Czech or Slovak past, whether in the coal industry the government ever sought to create revolutionary models like heroes of production, and whether anyone remembers them.
Well,
is that hard to understand? I'm sorry.
Maybe all of these are descendants, kids or grandkids of such heroes, no?
Yes. I mean, I find it interesting talking about, it's interesting talking about, for Czechs, I guess, and for Slovaks, talking about the socialist communist past, because literally it was a completely different country. It was a different country. Do you know what I mean? So as Czechoslovakia,
but still, I suppose there was some kind of propaganda that sort of involved changing landscapes, or at least, putting this and that kind of monument and signpost here and there, so that some topography is, and also, what fascinates me personally is, in the Czech Republic, they expulsed kind of a third of the population, and
the Germans.
Or Bohemians who spoke German. These places were partly repopulated, but partly abandoned, creating like, I don't know, Katarzyna, you don't leave out of protest against what I say, hopefully. I hope not to offend anybody.
No.
Yeah, it's a delicate topic. But
no, I'm sure. I always, it's a topic like that is something that it's hard to talk about even now, you know what I mean?
Hard to talk about, yeah. There are immediately people who say, well, why do you even mention that? Do you want to belittle the Holocaust? There are all the time people who suspect that you're talking about one thing in order to divert from another. But anyway, in North Korea, do they also have a kind of dead villages or dead cities? That were at one point, with those coal mining cities. In South Korea, they have that. They have actually a lot of cities that are, what's the term? You certainly know this term, declining anyway.
Yes, post-industrial.
Yeah, and the population is actually shrinking. So you have this notion that the urban spaces get bigger and bigger, but in fact there are a lot of cities that are shrinking because they had at some point an important role, and now post-industrial they are declining, like Detroit.
Yes.
And,
so North Korea's economy went through its economy went through an absolutely awful period where basically the industry stops. So most of the industry stops, most factories stop working. There's no production, but obviously North Korea, many people have left North Korea, so North Korea's population has not actually gone anywhere for many years. So it's always stayed around the same, if not slightly got smaller since for the last 30 years. But North Korea is very difficult to move. So unlike in China, you have to have your what's your registration called in China? I forget what it's called. You have to be registered in a particular place for your kids to be able to go to school, that sort of stuff. So in China, you can basically, most people can pay a fee and they can get permission to move somewhere else. But Their kids might not be able to go to school there, but they can go there. So they can move. But in North Korea, generally, apart from like the middle class elites, the population can't move. Yeah, so it doesn't matter that the factory doesn't work. It doesn't matter that the farm doesn't work. You have to stay. Yeah, there's no public transport anyway, really. So there's no way that you could move to a better place, because your party unit and your work unit and your community unit, they will make sure you don't move. Yeah. So whereas the industrial the industry bits of an industrial town may not work for a period, the towns often stay anyway. And in the last 10 years, the army has taken control of a lot of the industrial projects and made them work in a way. Yeah. So the economy picked up quite well for North Korea, and so the factories start working again, but they're just run by the army instead of the local work unit or something like that. And so, you know, whether they're making anything really useful or not is neither here nor there, but they still exist. So there aren't that many places that are completely post-industrial. Maybe that's because most places look quite post-industrial in North Korea, but the population stays the same because it's very immobile. It's hard for it to move, except in the far north. Yeah, so in the far north, along the border with China, you had a period where basically towns and villages just lost populations across the border. But those villages are now, they're quite good places to live because there's a lot of trading. Yeah, and so you can make a living trading into and out of North Korea, and you still live in North Korea, but you can make money and a living through trading with North Korea, with China, and so that makes life slightly easier. So you might not necessarily have to move to China. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So and also North Korea is determined always to keep things working, even if they should probably give up on things. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I'm just at this moment thinking of Kurbanov, what he said at the AKSE conference, that every Korean household has its own garden.
yes.
So that might also have an effect on.
Oh, that was very important. So in the past, before 1997, you weren't allowed to do that. Yeah. North Koreans were not allowed to cultivate their own land. Often they didn't have any patch of land that was theirs, but they certainly weren't allowed to cultivate it. And then in 1996, 97, the government basically saw that people were doing that anyway. And if they tried to stop it, people wouldn't have food and there would be a rebellion. So they allowed people to take control of portions of their own garden or the block of flats green space, and to grow their own food on there. And then later in the 2000s, they were allowed to sell parts of the harvest from that space. So, and that's how the Jangmadan, the guerrilla markets, came. So people were buying and selling each other's home produced food. And that is essentially what kept North Koreans alive. Yeah. so that kept North Koreans going. And for North Korea's government, it was basically they just delegated responsibility to the people. Yeah, it meant that they basically gave up their responsibility to give people food because they couldn't, and they gave the people the responsibility themselves to grow their own food. And that actually meant that people didn't starve. Yeah, and that bizarrely put less pressure on the government. That meant that there was less pressure on the government because at least people weren't starving. You know what I mean? So that's a very important aspect of North Korea's survival, is the North Korea's government's ability to know like when to just let go on something. Do you know what I mean? You know, like the population are not going to tolerate this, so you just have to not do it. Like when they tried to change the currency system, they changed the currency to get rid of people's savings, and that was extremely unpopular because it impoverished a lot of people who collected a lot of savings. And they didn't go back on it, but they allowed local banks to translate the money at the old rate, yeah, so that people could get their savings back, yeah. And then they just didn't try it again because it just didn't work, you know. Modi style reorganization of the money system, it was just so unpopular. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they would have had a revolution had they tried again. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was also, okay, sorry, somebody wanted to, Katarzyna, I think you had something on your lips, no? Okay, just a moment. Well, I have, of course, all kinds of questions, but I mean, I do not want to use this opportunity only for myself. So please come forward. The red soil fascinates me. You know, this thing that you sort of implied that it had a good sense to leave the hills barren, because then the earth would be exposed and people could like harvest this red soil or whatever. I did not fully get it. So you also showed this old photograph of people like doing some kind of, you know, like the gold miners, maybe washing something, some minerals out of it. But
yes,
I mean, yeah, can you dwell a bit more on it and explain that? What did they really, I mean, to which degree was this like an industry, and what kinds of things did they get out of the soil?
Oh, I mean, so that is, I'm looking for the slide. That's at a particular place in Korea. Yeah, it's Unsan, which is in North Korea now. And Unsan, that is the biggest gold mine in Korean history. There were other places where obviously gold was very important to Choson because it used to it was very important for Choson to supply tribute to the whichever Chinese dynasty was around, and gold was an important way. So the fact that North Korea had a lot of gold meant that it could really afford to pay the tribute, rather than extracting tax from the locals or like taking large portions of their agricultural produce or too much rice, because whenever they tried to do that, that just created hardship. Yeah, so discovering gold and being able to get gold out of the ground at Unsan and around Musan as well is both of which are in North Korea, was very important to Choson. However, the amount that they were extracting was actually really small in comparison to what was really there. Yeah, and so in the 1870s and 1880s, like Western firms, a guy called James Morse from Nebraska, also from Nebraska, signed contracts with the Choson government to properly extract gold there in a modern mining way. And they started this company called the American Oriental Consolidated Mining Company, which was a massive mining company focused on gold at Unsan and Musan. And it survived for a really long time. So like even in the colonial period, basically the colonial administration made it virtually impossible for Korean miners to own gold mines or own mines. It was only really Japanese companies that could own mines. And so Mitsubishi owned one and Sumitomo owned another. But the American Oriental Company was so productive and paid such a big fee to the colonial administration that they let it stay there. Yeah, and they only closed the Americans down the day after Pearl Harbor. Yeah, so they existed all the way to 1941. I mean, it wasn't James Morse's family by that time. It was the shareholders. It was shareholders of the company owned it. And that mine is really productive. It was like really productive all the way through the colonial period. And other mines around that area were also very productive. They found a lot of other materials like in the past they used to call it black sands. But then they came up with this name called monazite. And it's basically an ore which contains, we now know it contains thorium and rare earth materials. So at the time it was used for the making of magnets, yeah. But they didn't realize that you could extract it a little bit better, extract it further or distill it further, and you get thorium, which is radioactive. And it's important in history because the Japanese thought they could build their nuclear weapons from the thorium derived from that mine, and so there's a lot of efforts so that they were trying to ship the thorium mine there round to Germany in the Second World War by submarine to try and give Germany a supply of thorium so they could make a heavy water reactor and stuff like that. Anyway, so the Americans managed to basically sink all the submarines. And then when the Korean War happened, one of the very first things the American Air Force destroys in the whole of Korea is that mine, yeah, because they know exactly what's in that mine. And now that mine is the most productive mine in the whole of North Korea for gold, coal, and rare earth materials. And I think they also mine zinc there. So that mine has a long history of being a very productive, a real mine. And those guys you saw like scrabbling around with the like hand sieves, yeah, they obviously were extracting gold. There was an artisanal community around there, and they did get gold. They didn't get that much gold, but they got enough to live on, you know. So they were really, it was a very productive place, yeah. The map that I showed is was basically Carl Christian Goethe was a Danish geologist who got invited to Korea by Count von Mollendorf in 1884. He'd been setting up the ministry, he'd been setting up the geology faculty at Tokyo University, and von Mollendorf invited him to come to Korea because he knew he'd be interested in the geology of Korea. And he walked around Korea buying maps and atlases along the way, and annotating the atlases with what people told him about the geology and where the various minerals are in various places around the Korean peninsula. And then he went back to Hamburg and set up the University of Hamburg's geology department. And all of his collections, including all those maps, are in the Hamburger Museum of Ethnology in Hamburg. All with his little writing, his little handwritten notes on the side of all of the maps. And he writes about how productive that mine is and what you can find in each mine. So it's very interesting. So that's what that slide was about. I don't know if that answers your question, but like,
I'm glad that I triggered so many interesting stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fascinating thing. Robert Neff, among others, has also done a lot of research about those.
I owe Robert Neff a debt of gratitude because Robert Neff, who's, I mean, not an academic, but he should be, he did this extraordinary project, a gold miner in Chosun, Korea, where he somehow got the diaries of a gold miner in Korea from the gold miner's family. And he's just done this exhaustive like work on the diary, and also looking through the various newspaper archives in the area of the United States where his family were from, and like really put together just an unbelievable piece of work on one perspective, an American perspective on a place like on a gold mining mine in Korea at this time. His work is amazing. I honestly wish he would publish a book, you know.
Of course, yeah. And I mean, he certainly at one point might. No, I won't speculate on his archive, but it's tremendous, and people would like feed it. You know, the descendants would send him.
Really. I've met him a number of times, and he's an amazing guy.
In heritage, yeah. Well, I mean, my question was about the soil, because it sounded
the soils.
as if there would be a justification for not leaving, you know, for leaving the hills barren. I mean, chop down the wood and not foresting it up, but leaving it as is. So, I mean, that's not the case that this has had a good sense. I mean, because when you're talking about mining, it's going into the
yes, no, so I mean, the red soil is essentially is an impact of geology. So the fact that the soil is red doesn't really have any implications to like whether there's any extra value or not value in the soil. The soil is red because of it's got a lot of iron oxide in it, yeah, and so it appears red because it's rusty, yeah. But leaving them barren, that is the red soils. The red soils are not the reason why they're barren. The reason why they're barren is because people have overexploited the forests. Yeah. Red pine, the red soils, and so the red pine that grows in the red soils has a longer growing life. It takes longer to grow than other species of trees, and they don't grow quite as tall because the soil is productive, but not as productive as other soils. Yeah. So the ecology is fragile, yeah, but the one thing that the soils are good for is growing mushrooms and other vegetables in the soils beneath the trees, yeah, which is a very traditional, sort of ways of Korean forest management, you know, and so you could only see the red soils when they were overexploited. So obviously the late Joseon dynasty overexploited some of its soil, overexploited its forests, because of the pressures of modernity, and then the Japanese colonization, basically they cut down all the forests to basically grow new trees on the forest. So for a period they were very barren, and the red soil was exposed. And in the sort of Japanese colonial mind, this red soil was like a warning. Do you know what I mean? It was like it was a signifier of how poor the soil was on the peninsula, and something wrong with the soil that needed to be changed, you know.
Yeah. Well, Western travelers also mentioned often that the hillsides would be barren and deforested already in the late 19th century.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah,
there's been a period of population growth, and the late period of the Joseon dynasty was fairly chaotic bureaucratically and institutionally. So a lot of the structures and processes that the earlier versions of the earlier bureaucracies of the Joseon dynasty had managed to keep in check were perhaps not being kept in check by that point. The last few decades of the Joseon dynasty is just one crisis after another. Do you know what I mean? It's awful.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, I mean, that's maybe it's awful might not be the best way to conclude.
No.
But we ran out of time. So I mean, I know that you could entertain and actually a much bigger audience for many more hours without them getting bored, but yeah, we have this time line. So can anybody say a nice word in the end? Irina Shea, you joined us at some point in the second half also.
No, I actually joined in the first half.
Only yes,
my camera isn't working, so
yes,
you probably didn't see me. Yeah, I would like to thank you for the interesting lecture. There were some points that I noted down that were very, very interesting. For example, about the border of Mount Baekdu.
Yes,
I definitely didn't know. Yeah, and then the one about the weird sections, for example, for the sea cucumbers. That was a very, very interesting fact. So thank you for devoting your time to us and educating us on some issues that we didn't know before.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And that thing I said about the border is the work was done by Nanshen Song, who wrote a book called The Tumen River Demarcation. Yeah, borders in East Asia, something like that. So it's been published by University of Cambridge Press. It's a brilliant piece of work, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you so much. It's now 1 p.m. and I have to conclude this. Well, yeah, thank you so much for coming. Normally, yeah, we would now have a nice lunch in Olomouc, but
yeah,
well, I wish you some well, nice lunch at home, and thank you all the participants for having attended. And yeah, we will meet. I mean, this carousel lecture class will meet in 1 week already, out of our written. And yeah.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert. Thank you so much.
And yeah, you're very welcome. Have a good Christmas and stuff, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert. Can you yeah? Can you stay for
Leave.
a minute?
Yeah, of course. I'll leave.
No.
Bye-bye.
Stay for a minute. Huh?
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, and so yeah, I wish you a good weekend. Thank you. Thank
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah. Yeah. Robert, I mean, I won't hold you back now, but it's simply about, well, this recording, because well, it will now be saved on my computer.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose you don't have access to the recording now, isn't it?
I won't have access to the recording now. So what can you get the raw file?
Yes.
Yeah. And share it with me via Dropbox or Google Drive or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will I'll edit out the bits. Yeah.
Yes. Maybe cut out, you know, in the beginning, you may cut out like the first 16 minutes or so, and then at the start there were a few moments, and in between, I mean, at one point I wrote it down, but when you muted yourself, maybe you can cut that off.
Yes.
And yeah, but otherwise, I mean, yeah, it was great, really.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so just send it to me by Google Drive. I can even create a folder for you if you like to put it in.
Well, Google Drive. Or may I try sending it with a Czech thing called Usho?
Yeah, WeTransfer or anything. Just you know, yeah. I don't mind. I'm happy to use any of them.
Okay. Good. So
and I'll edit it, and then I will share the edit with you. And I'll upload it to our Vimeo account and put it on the AKSE website.
Super.
Yeah. And I'll let Elsa, who's running the EPEL money and sort of bureaucracy side, I'll let her know, and I'll send you the link when it's done. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's funny. I've spent all year doing this, like, you know, like editing people's videos and like and like putting them up on the website and stuff like that. So I've already done one actually. There's already one of me up there. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's funny. But anyway, so it's fine. I'll manage it. Don't worry.
Okay.
But I'll share it with you before I put it up, obviously, so you can improve. Yeah. And do you want me to take the questions out at the end, or do you want me to leave the questions in?
Ooh, what do you think?
Normally like other places take the questions out so that there's no
Okay.
because having student voices and consent and that sort of stuff, that's problematic. Yeah. So
Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So let's just
so normally it's just literally the lecture period. Yeah.
have it. Okay. Okay. So then let's reduce it to that. Yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
it's otherwise it might be.
I mean, it's
awkward.
long enough as it is. Yeah. You know.
Well, it was very entertaining. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I actually. Yeah, that was quite long, but I mean, I obviously could talk for a lot longer, but like, you know, I feel well done to your students for sticking with it, you know?
Yeah, I think they enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have a good afternoon.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much for inviting me in the first place. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much for, I mean, and I would have loved to have you, to host you in Olomouc, but maybe there can be another opportunity. Yeah.
I hope so. I mean, I would have loved to have been there, you know, like I was really looking forward to the train and getting, you know, all that sort of stuff. So, you know, such is life, you know, such is COVID life, you know.
Okay. Yeah. Well, hopefully not long. Yeah. Anymore. Goodbye.
Right.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Have a good day, Robert. Yeah.
And thanks again.
No, thank you. No, thank you. Vielen Dank.
Vielen Dank. Yes. Tschüss.
Herzlichen Dank. Und tschüss. Ja, Papa. Papa.